The sun didn't care that Emma Brooks was 5 years old. It beat down on her shoulders the same way it beat down on the cactus and the dirt and the buzzards circling lazy overhead. She had been walking for what felt like forever, though she couldn't measure time in hours anymore. She measured it in steps, 100 steps past the rock that looked like a horse, 200 steps past the dead mesquite tree, 300 steps until Noah cried again, and she had to stop and jiggle him quiet against her chest. Her bare feet pressed into sand so hot it should have blistered, but her soles had gone numb long ago, leathery with calluses from a life where shoes were a luxury she had never truly known. She was 5 years old, but she had been taking care of herself since she was 4, since her daddy got sick and the world shrank to a dark room and a bed where a man she loved coughed and coughed until the sound became part of the air she breathed. The wagon rut stretched out ahead of her, 2 thin lines disappearing into a shimmer of heat that turned the horizon into water that she could never reach. She knew it was a trick. Her daddy had told her about mirages once, back when he could still sit up and talk for more than a few minutes at a time. "Don't you go chasing what ain't real, Emma," he had said, his voice dry as paper. "You keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on what's solid." She tried. She kept her eyes on the ruts, on the bits of sagebrush, on the distant shapes of mountains that never seemed to get any closer. But the mirage danced in front of her anyway, a promise of water that was just light playing tricks on a broken world. Noah squirmed in her arms, a tiny bundle wrapped in a cloth that had once been white. He was 3 weeks old, maybe 4. She had lost count of the days in the darkness of Vanessa's house. His face was red and tight, his little fists punching at the empty air, and when he cried, it was a thin wailing sound that cut right through Emma's chest. She was hungry, had been hungry for as long as she could remember, but this hunger was different. This was a hollow ache that gnawed at her stomach, turning her insides into something sharp and desperate. She had found half a biscuit in her pocket, stale and crumbling, and she had saved it for Noah. She had soaked it in the last few drops of water from the canteen Vanessa had left behind, not out of kindness, but out of carelessness. And she had pressed the soggy mush against Noah's tiny lips, watching him latch on with a survival instinct that made her want to cry and cheer at the same time. But that was hours ago. The biscuit was gone, the water was gone, and the sun was still climbing. She walked past a patch of dry grass and a rattler, coiled and waiting. She saw it in time to stop, her heart lurching into her throat as the sound buzzed through the air. She remembered what her daddy had taught her: freeze, wait, let it pass. She stood still, holding Noah against her, her own breath coming in shallow gasps, and the snake watched her with black eyes that held no malice, just the cold arithmetic of survival. After what felt like forever, it slithered away into the brush, and Emma let out the breath she had been holding. She kept walking. Vanessa had told her she was nothing. "No one will miss you," she had said, her voice flat and cold as a winter creek. "You're a burden I've carried long enough. Your daddy is dead, and there is nothing left of you but a pair of hungry mouths that don't belong to anyone." The words had stung then, but out here, under the weight of the sun, they had hardened into something else, a shield. She was not nothing. She had Noah, and she had a promise. She would die before she let anything happen to him. She walked for another mile, her legs trembling, her arms aching, her mind growing fuzzy around the edges. The heat was a blanket that muffled everything. The colors of the world bled into each other, the sky a faded blue that almost hurt to look at. She was thinking about her daddy, about the way he used to sing to her at night, off-key and earnest, some old song about a cowboy who rode into a long valley and never came back. She had always thought it was a sad song, but he had hummed it anyway, and his voice had made her feel safe. She missed that sound. She missed the way he would hold her hand when they walked into town, his palm rough and warm, a fortress against the world. But he was gone, and she was alone. Except for Noah. She held him tighter, and he mewled against her, a small sound that was part complaint, part plea. "I know," she whispered. "I know, baby. We'll find water soon, I promise." The sun was past its highest point when she heard something that didn't belong to the desert. A horse. Not a wagon, not the creak of wheels, but the steady rhythm of hooves on packed earth. She stopped. Her heart beat faster, and for a moment she didn't know whether to run or to freeze. She had been taught to be afraid of strangers. Vanessa had made sure of that. But out here, in the middle of nowhere, strangers were the only chance she had. She turned, slow, and saw a figure on a big bay horse, a man silhouetted against the sun. He was still a good distance away, riding along the crest of a low rise, and he had stopped, his head tilted as if he was listening. Emma's arms tightened around Noah. The man seemed huge, a giant on a giant beast, and every instinct in her body screamed at her to hide. But there was nowhere to hide. The desert was flat and open, a table of dust and heat. The man started to ride toward her, not fast, but deliberate, a steady trot that ate up the ground between them. Emma stood her ground. She had her feet planted apart, the way her daddy had taught her when she faced down a stray bull that had gotten into the yard. "You don't run," he had said. "You stand and you let them know you're not afraid. Even if you are, you don't let them see it." She stood. The man reined in his horse about 20 feet away, and he swung down from the saddle with a slowness that was more careful than lazy. He was a big man, with broad shoulders and a face that the sun had written on in lines and creases. His eyes squinted at her from under a dusty hat, and when he spoke, his voice was low and rough, like gravel rolling downhill. "Afternoon, little miss." Emma didn't answer. She watched him, watching his hands. He kept them in sight, one resting on the saddle horn, the other hanging loose at his side. "I don't mean you any harm," he said. "I'm Cole Turner. I got a ranch about 4 miles back that way. This here's my land you're walking on." She still didn't answer. Noah whimpered, and she shushed him, her eyes never leaving the man. Cole Turner crouched down. It was a deliberate move, making himself smaller. She had seen men do that with horses, with skittish animals that needed to be reassured. She knew what it meant. She didn't trust it. "You lost?" he asked. "No, sir." The sound of her own voice surprised her. It came out stronger than she felt. "Then you got a destination in mind?" "Town." "Town's the other direction, sweetheart. You're walking away from it." Emma looked behind her, at the empty horizon. She had been following the wagon ruts. They had to lead somewhere. "That don't mean I'm going the wrong way," she said. Cole Turner almost smiled. Almost. "No, I suppose it don't. But you're going to hit the Gila riverbed in about 3 miles, and there ain't nothing there but dry rocks and a dead cow or two. And after that, there's nothing at all until you get to the old stagecoach station, and that's been closed for 10 years. Emma absorbed this. She looked down at Noah, whose face was now a shade of pink that worried her. He wasn't crying anymore. He was too hot, too tired, too everything. She looked back at the man. "How far to town?" she asked. "From here? About 20 miles the way you're going. Or you can cut across and make it 18, but you gotta know the trail. I can find it. Maybe you can, but that baby in your arms ain't gonna make 18 miles in this heat, not without water, and not without shade." Emma's chin quivered. She bit her lip to stop it. She would not cry. She would not. Cole Turner stood up slow. He reached behind him, and her body tensed, but he only pulled a canteen off his saddle. He held it out, unscrewed the top, and took a long drink himself, swallowing loud enough for her to hear. Then he stepped closer, leaving the horse behind, and he held the canteen out to her. "Here, take it. It's just water." He was still 3 feet away, but he held the canteen where she could reach it if she took a step. She didn't move. "You can have it," he said. "I got more. You can drink, and you can give some to the babe. I ain't asking for nothing in return." Emma searched his face. She had been taught to look for the bad in people. Vanessa had taught her that. But Vanessa was a monster who wore a pretty face, and this man's face was not pretty. It was worn and weathered and honest in a way she didn't have words for. She took a step. She reached out and took the canteen. Her hand was shaking so hard she almost dropped it. Cole Turner watched her. He kept his hands at his sides. Emma lifted the canteen to her own lips first. She knew she had to be strong to carry Noah, and strong meant not collapsing from thirst. She took 3 gulps, the water cold and sweet, and so good it made her eyes sting. Then she tipped the canteen against Noah's mouth, letting a few drops fall on his lips. He gasped. his tongue darting out, and she gave him a little more, carefully, the way she had seen the women in town feed babies from a spoon. He coughed, then latched on to the drip of water, as if it was the only thing in the world. "Easy," Emma whispered. "Easy, baby." When she was done, she handed the canteen back. "Thank you, mister." "You're welcome, little miss. You got a name?" "Emma Brooks." "That's a real pretty name. And that little fella?" "Noah. He's my brother." Cole Turner nodded. He looked at the baby, then at Emma, then at the trail behind her. "How long you been out here?" "Since this morning." "This morning is a long time when you're walking. Who brought you out here?" Emma's jaw set. She looked away. "Vanessa. Vanessa your mama?" "No, she's the one who married my daddy after my real mama died. She ain't our mama. She never was." Cole Turner was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was lower, harder. "Where is she now?" "Gone." "Gone where?" "Just gone. She said we was too much. She said nobody would miss us." The words hung in the air. Cole Turner took off his hat and ran a hand through his hair. He looked at the horizon, and Emma saw something pass across his face that she didn't understand. It looked like grief, but it was older than that. It was a kind of weariness that came from seeing too much of the worst in the world. "Well," he said, "I guess that's the last time she'll ever be right about anything." He put his hat back on, settled it down, and he looked at Emma with eyes that were suddenly soft. "Miss Emma, I'm going to make you an offer, and I want you to think about it before you answer. My ranch is 4 miles back. I got a woman there named Martha. She cooks better than anyone in 3 counties, and she's got a soft spot for strays. I got a barn full of hay, and a house with a roof that don't leak. And I got a doctor who comes through every couple of weeks and checks on the hands. You and Noah come with me. I'll see you fed and watered and safe. And if you don't like it, if you decide you want to go somewhere else, I'll put you in a wagon and take you wherever you want to go. No strings, no debts, just a place to breathe for a while." Emma stared at him. The sun was behind him now, casting his shadow long across the dust. She had never met a man who talked like this. Her daddy had been kind, but he had been her daddy. This man was a stranger, and yet something in his voice made her want to trust him. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do that?" Cole Turner looked at his horse, a big bay standing patient and still in the heat. He looked at the sky, then he looked back at her. "Because my horse stopped in the middle of the trail," he said, "and he ain't done that in 12 years. I reckon he stopped for a reason, and I figure that reason is you." Emma didn't understand. Horses stopped all the time, but she looked at the bay, who was now watching her with one ear cocked forward, and there was something in its gaze that she couldn't name. She saw the man's eyes go to her feet, and she followed his gaze. Her feet were dirty and cracked, a bruise blooming on the heel of her left foot. She didn't remember when that happened. "You hurt?" he asked. "My feet," she said, because she felt like she had to say something. "I can fix that. I got boots at the ranch. They'll be too big, but they'll be something." Noah stirred, let out a thin wail, and settled back against her. Emma looked at the man, and she made a decision. "All right," she said. Cole Turner nodded. He walked to his horse and pulled a bedroll off the back of the saddle, shaking it out into a rough blanket. He held it up. "I'm going to spread this on the horse. You get on, and you hold Noah tight. I'll lead the horse slow. It'll take us a while, but we'll get there. You ain't riding? I'll walk. Easier on the horse, and easier on you." Emma didn't argue. She let him lift her up onto the horse, his hands careful and steady on her waist, and she settled onto the blanket with Noah in her lap. The horse shifted beneath her but didn't spook. It seemed to know what was expected of it. Cole Turner took the reins and started walking. The horse followed, and Emma sat on its back, swaying with the rhythm of its steps. The sun was lower now, casting longer shadows, and the world was painted in shades of gold and amber. Emma didn't speak. Neither did Cole Turner. They just walked, and the silence was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of a thing that was settling into place. 4 miles took nearly 2 hours. The ranch came into view slowly, a cluster of buildings set against a low hill. A barn, a corral, a house with a porch and a chimney that sent up a thin ribbon of smoke. As they approached, a woman came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on an apron. She was broad-shouldered and gray-haired, with a face that had seen a lot of living. "Cole Turner, what have you dragged home now?" she called, but her voice was not harsh. It was tired and warm. "Found her on the range, Martha. She and a baby. Need a place for the night. Need a place longer than that by the looks of it. You come here, child. Let me see you." Emma let the woman lift her down from the horse. Martha was strong, her hands rough but gentle. She looked at Emma, at the baby, at the state of everything, and her face did something complicated. She didn't say anything about the bruises, though her eyes lingered on them. She just nodded. "Let's get you inside. I got stew on the stove, and I can heat some milk for the babe." Emma walked into the house. It was warm, smelled of wood smoke and onions. There was a fire in the hearth, and a rocking chair in the corner, and a long table where a lamp was already lit. Martha guided her to a chair and sat her down. Emma didn't realize how tired she was until she sat, and then the exhaustion hit her like a wave, making her head swim. "Give me the baby," Martha said. Emma hesitated. Her arms tightened around Noah. "You can have him back," Martha said. "I just need to fix him a bottle. He's hungry, and I got a cow out back that's giving milk. You can watch me the whole time." Emma looked into Martha's face. It was not the face of a liar. She handed Noah over, and Martha took him with the ease of a woman who had held 1,000 babies. She moved to the stove, and Emma watched her, every movement, without blinking. Cole Turner came in through the back door. He took off his hat and hung it on a peg. He looked at Emma, sitting at the table, small and fragile in the lamplight. "Martha, send for Doc Whitfield in the morning. I'll send Billy at first light." "Good. And Martha." "I know, Cole. I see it." They were talking about the bruises. Emma knew. She didn't say anything. She watched Martha warm milk, watched her pour it into a small bottle, watched her test it on her wrist. Martha brought the bottle to Emma. "Here, you feed him. You got steady hands." Emma took the bottle. She touched it to Noah's lips, and he latched on, sucking with a desperate greed that made her heart ache. She cradled him in her arms, and she looked at the fire, and she felt the warmth of the house seeping into her bones. Cole Turner sat down across from her. He didn't speak. He just sat, and his presence was a weight in the room that was somehow comforting. "Mister?" "Call me Cole." "Cole," she said, testing the name. "Vanessa is going to come looking for us." He looked at her, and his eyes hardened. "Let her come. She's got money, she's got men, she's got a lawyer. I got a conscience and a good horse, and I've outrun 2 armies and a drought. She don't know what she's walking into." Emma didn't know if he was telling the truth, but something in the way he said it made her believe him. For the first time all day, she took a breath that didn't hurt. She looked down at Noah, who was drinking contentedly, his tiny hand curled around her finger. She looked at the fire, at the woman stirring something on the stove, at the man sitting across from her with his hat in his hands and dust on his boots. And she thought, maybe, just maybe, she had found a place to land. But in the back of her mind, a voice that sounded like Vanessa's whispered that it wouldn't last. It never did. And somewhere out on the darkening range, a wagon with a woman in black was rolling toward a town where she could buy lies, and men to back them up. She had not forgotten that she left something behind. She intended to get it back, or burn it to ashes. The night settled over the Triple T Ranch, and in the house, a little girl held her brother and stared into the flames. And Cole Turner watched her, and made a promise to himself that he didn't yet know how to keep. But he would learn. He would learn, or break, trying. The night passed without incident, but none of them slept much. Martha stayed up with Noah, feeding him every 2 hours the way the doctor would later insist upon, her rough hands cradling his tiny head with a tenderness that seemed impossible given their size. Emma slept in Cole's bed, curled on her side with her knees drawn up to her chest, her small body taking up barely a quarter of the mattress. She had not wanted to be alone, though she had not said it in words. She had simply stood in the doorway of the bedroom, clutching the blanket Martha had wrapped around her shoulders, and looked at Cole with those dark eyes that asked a question without making a sound. Cole had pointed at the chair in the corner. "I'll be right there, Miss Emma. I ain't going nowhere." She had nodded, climbed into the bed, and been asleep before her head hit the pillow. And, true to his word, Cole had sat in that chair, his boots off, his hat on his knee, watching the rise and fall of her chest in the dim glow of the lamp. He had not closed his eyes once. He had held vigil over a child he had known for less than 12 hours, and something in him had shifted, the way a river shifts course after a flood, carving a new channel through ground that had been dry for a decade. Dawn came pale and thin through the window, and with it came the sound of hoofbeats. Cole was on his feet before the horse had stopped, his hand going to the rifle he had leaned against the wall. But it was only Doc Whitfield, riding in on a sway-backed mare that looked as old as he was. Doc was a small man with a face like a dried apple and eyes that had seen every kind of trouble the territory could throw at a body. He swung down stiffly, tied his horse to the rail, and walked up the porch steps with his black bag in his hand. "You got a boy at my door before sunrise, Cole. Said you found a child." "Two children," Cole said. "A girl, 5 years old, and a newborn boy. Their stepmother left them in the desert yesterday, drove off and abandoned them." Doc Whitfield's face went still. He had been practicing medicine in this part of Arizona for 30 years, and he had seen his share of horrors, but the still expression was a bad sign. It meant he was adding another one to the list. "Where are they?" "Inside. The girl's asleep in my bed. The baby's in the kitchen with Martha." Doc nodded and walked past Cole into the house. He found Martha at the stove, a pot of coffee already steaming, and the baby in a cradle she had pulled down from the attic, a cradle that had once held a child of her own, a child who had not lived past his first winter. She did not speak about that, but Doc knew the story. Everyone in the county knew the story. "Let me see the baby first," Doc said. He set his bag on the table and bent over the cradle. Noah was awake, his eyes wide and unfocused, his tiny face still flushed from the heat of the previous day. Doc touched his forehead, his cheeks, his chest. He listened to his breathing through a stethoscope that had seen better decades. He checked his color, his pulse, the soft spot on his head. "He's dehydrated," Doc said, "and he's underfed. But I've seen worse, much worse. He'll pull through if he gets regular feeding and stays out of the heat." "But Cole, this child was hours away from being beyond my help. Hours." "I know," Cole said. "I need you to understand that. Another 4 or 5 hours out in that sun, and we'd be having a different conversation." "I understand." Doc looked at him. "Where's the girl?" Emma appeared in the doorway. She had heard the voices, had woken to the sound of a stranger in the house. She stood in her bare feet, her dress wrinkled from sleep, her hair a wild tangle around her face. She looked at Doc Whitfield with the same steady gaze she had given Cole the day before, and she did not flinch. "You the doctor?" she asked. "I am, little miss. Name's Whitfield. You must be Emma." "Yes, sir." "Your brother is going to be just fine, Emma. He needs rest and milk, and he'll get plenty of both here. But I need to take a look at you, make sure you're all right as well. Is that okay?" Emma did not answer. She looked at Cole. He nodded once. "It's okay, Miss Emma. You can trust him." She walked into the kitchen and sat down at the table. She did not climb onto the chair properly. She hoisted herself up and sat on the edge, her feet dangling, her hands folded in her lap. Doc Whitfield sat down across from her, his movements slow and deliberate. He did not reach for her. He did not touch her. He just looked at her for a long moment, letting her get used to him. "Emma, I'm going to ask you to lift your sleeves. Can you do that for me?" She hesitated. Then she pushed up the sleeves of her dress, one at a time. The bruises were not the worst Doc had ever seen, but they were bad enough. Purple and yellow and green, a patchwork of old injuries layered over new ones, some shaped like fingers, some like the edge of a hand, some round and dark like the end of a stick. Cole had seen them the night before when he carried her to bed. He had seen them and had turned away so she would not see his face. He had stood in the dark hallway with his fists pressed against the wall, breathing through his teeth, until he could trust himself to speak again. Doc examined the bruises without touching them. He noted the ones on her arms, the ones on her collarbone, the faint yellow mark on her jaw. He asked her to lift her dress just above her knees, and he saw the marks there too. He did not ask what happened. He did not need to. He had been a doctor long enough to know the patterns of cruelty. "Emma," he said, "has anyone ever hurt you?" She did not answer. Her eyes went to the window, to the light coming in, to the dust motes dancing in the beam. Emma, Doc said again, gentle. I'm not going to do anything you don't want me to. But I need to know. Was it the woman who left you yesterday? She did, Emma said. Her voice was flat, as if she were reciting a fact from a book. She said I was worthless. She said Noah was a curse. She said my daddy dying was my fault because I was too loud and too much and I made him tired. Cole's hand tightened on the back of the chair. Martha turned from the stove, her face pale. Doc Whitfield sat back. He looked at Cole, and Cole saw something in his eyes that he had never seen before. Not anger, something worse. Something that looked like a man deciding that the law was not enough and that some things needed to be settled in older ways. Emma, Doc said, I want you to listen to me. None of what she said was true. Do you hear me? None of it. Your daddy's sickness was not your fault, and you are not worthless. You are one of the bravest little girls I have ever had the privilege to meet. Emma looked at him. Her chin trembled. She bit her lip and looked away. Doc turned to Cole. I need to speak to you outside. They stepped onto the porch. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the yard. Doc closed the door behind them and stood with his hands in his pockets, looking out at the corral where a couple of horses were nosing at a hay bale. Cole, those bruises are not from one beating. They're from months of beatings, maybe longer. The girl has been abused systematically, likely since her father fell ill. The stepmother may have escalated after his death, but this is a pattern. A long one. I figured as much. Then you also figured that the law is going to have questions. If the stepmother comes back, if she contests custody, if anyone from the territory gets wind of this, there's going to be an investigation. And that little girl is going to have to tell her story to strangers over and over again. You ready for that? I'll do whatever I need to do. That's not what I asked. I asked if she's ready for that. Cole looked at the door. He could picture her inside, sitting at the table, small and silent, and carrying a weight that no child should carry. I don't know, he said, but I know one thing. That woman, the stepmother, she didn't just abandon them. Emma told me something last night, something I haven't told Martha yet. She said her daddy had money, a lot of money. He put it in a trust for her and Noah, and the stepmother didn't know about it. She thought she was getting everything, but the real fortune is hidden, and Emma knows where. Doc turned to face him. Where? In the floor of their old house in Blackwell's, under a floorboard in the bedroom. Her daddy showed her before he died. Doc was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, that changes everything. If there's a trust, legal documents, proof that the stepmother was trying to steal what wasn't hers, that's leverage. That's the kind of evidence that can put her away for good. That's what I'm thinking. So what are you going to do? I'm going to ride to Blackwell's. I'm going to find that house and I'm going to get those papers before she does. Because if she finds them first, she'll burn them. And then it's her word against Emma's. And a child's word doesn't count for much in some courts. Blackwell's is 2 days' hard ride. I know. And you're going to leave Emma and the baby here with Martha and me. I'm going to leave them here with a rifle and a shotgun and 3 hired hands who owe me their jobs and their loyalty. And I'm going to ride so hard that I'll be back before that stepmother even notices I'm gone. Doc shook his head. Cole, you're not a young man anymore. I'm 42. That's old enough to know what matters and young enough to do something about it. Doc looked at him, then he nodded. All right, but you take provisions, and you take a second horse, and you send word ahead to Sheriff Briggs in Blackwell's. Let him know what you're doing. If things go sideways, you'll need someone on your side. I'll send Billy with a telegram soon as I'm ready. Good. They went back inside. Emma was still at the table, but now she had Noah in her arms, feeding him from a bottle Martha had prepared. She looked up as they came in, and her eyes went straight to Cole's face. She read something there, something that made her grip the bottle a little tighter. You're going somewhere, she said. It was not a question. Cole pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his hands clasped. He looked at her the way he would look at a grown man he was about to ask to do something dangerous. Miss Emma, I need to ride to Blackwell's. I need to go to your daddy's house and get those papers you told me about. The ones under the floor, the ones that prove everything. I need to bring them back here before Vanessa can get to them. Emma's face did not change, but her hands tightened on Noah. "When?" she asked. "Today, now, soon as I can saddle the horses." "How long will you be gone?" 4 days, maybe 5 if the weather holds." "And if it don't?" "Then 6, but no longer, I swear it." Emma looked down at Noah. The baby was drinking steadily, his tiny hand curled around her finger. She watched him for a long time. "Mr. Cole?" "Yes, Miss Emma." "Vanessa is going to find out you went. She's got people everywhere. She's got men who do things for her. She's going to send them after you." "I know." "Then why are you going?" "Because those papers are the only thing that can send her away for good. Without them, she can come back. She can lie to a judge and take you and Noah away from here. With them, she's got nothing. She's just a woman who abandoned 2 children in the desert, and that's enough to put her behind bars for a long time." Emma thought about this. She was a child who had learned to think like a survivor, weighing odds and outcomes the way other children weighed marbles or candy. "If she catches you, she'll kill you." Cole did not flinch. "She can try." "She will." "I know." "Then why are you still going?" Cole looked at her. He looked at the bruises on her arms, the shadows under her eyes, the way she held her brother like he was the only thing in the world she had left. And he said the only thing he could say, "Because you asked me to cross my heart, Miss Emma, and I meant it." Emma looked at him. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. She blinked them back and nodded. "Then you better go," she said, "and you better come back." "I will." "Cross your heart." Cole drew the X across his chest, slow and deliberate. "Cross my heart, Miss Emma Brooks." He stood up. Martha was already at the cupboard, packing a sack of hardtack and dried beef, a canteen, a spare box of cartridges. She worked without speaking, her movements quick and efficient. When she was done, she handed the sack to Cole. "You be careful, Cole Turner, you hear me?" "I hear you. That little girl is going to ask for you the minute you're out of sight, and I'm going to have to tell her you're coming back, so you better make sure I'm not lying." "I will." Cole took the sack and walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the latch. He looked back at Emma, still sitting at the table, holding Noah, her dark eyes fixed on him. "Miss Emma?" "Yes, sir." "While I'm gone, you listen to Martha. You eat what she puts in front of you. You sleep in my bed every night, and you don't get up until the sun is well up. And if anyone comes to this door that ain't me or Doc or one of my hands, you go to the cellar and you stay there until Martha tells you it's safe. You understand?" "I understand." "You remember the pattern on the porch floor? The loose board near the water barrel?" "Yes, sir." "That's where the rifle is. Martha will show you how to use it if you need to." "But I pray you don't." Emma nodded. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Cole opened the door. The morning air hit him, cool and clean, smelling of dust and sage and the promise of heat to come. He stepped out onto the porch. Buck was already saddled, and a second horse, a sturdy roan, stood beside him. Billy, the boy who had ridden for the doctor, was holding the reins. "Billy, you stay here. You help Martha and Doc. You don't leave this property for any reason until I get back." "Yes, Mr. Turner." Cole swung up onto Buck. The horse shifted beneath him, eager to move. He gathered the reins, looked back at the house one last time, and saw Emma standing in the doorway. She had come to the threshold, holding Noah, her small silhouette framed by the darkness behind her. He tipped his hat to her. She did not tip her head back. She just stood there, watching him, a little girl with the eyes of a soldier. Cole touched his heels to Buck's sides, and the horse moved forward. The roan followed. They passed through the yard, past the corral, out onto the trail that led south toward Blackwell's. Cole did not look back again. He did not need to. He carried the image of her standing in that doorway like a brand on his soul. The ride was long and hot. He pushed Buck hard, alternating with the roan to keep a steady pace. The miles passed slowly, the landscape unchanging. Dry grass, scattered mesquite, the distant blue humps of mountains that seemed to move with him. He stopped only twice to rest the horses and to drink from his canteen. He ate the hardtack Martha had packed, chewing it dry and washing it down with water that tasted of tin and dust. His mind churned as he rode. He thought about Emma, about the way she had looked at him when he told her he was leaving. She had not begged him to stay. She had not cried. She had simply accepted it, the way she seemed to accept everything, because somewhere along the way she had learned that begging never changed anything. That was the worst part. Not the bruises, not the starvation, but the quiet acceptance of a child who had learned that adults could not be trusted to keep promises. He thought about Vanessa. He had never met her, but he had built a picture of her in his mind. A woman who used beauty as a weapon, who smiled with her mouth and not her eyes, who had married a dying man for his money and then hastened his departure. A woman who had looked at 2 children and seen only obstacles. He did not know what he would do if he met her face to face. He hoped he would have the self-control to let the law handle her. But he did not know. He thought about his own life, the years of solitude after Mary died, the way he had filled the silence with work, with cattle, with the endless cycle of sun and moon and season. He had thought he was content. He had told himself that he did not need anyone, that he was better off alone, that the pain of losing someone was not worth the risk of loving them. And then, in the middle of the desert, a horse had stopped, and everything had changed. The first night he camped under a rock overhang, a shallow cave that offered some shelter from the wind. He built no fire. He did not want to announce his presence to anyone who might be watching. He ate more hardtack, gave the horses water, and sat with his back against the rock, his rifle across his knees, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. He thought about what Emma had said about the man in the black hat, the one who had come to the house when her daddy was sick, the one she had seen again with Vanessa in the yard. That man was a danger. He was the kind of man who did the dirty work for people who paid well, and he knew that Cole had taken the children. He had been there when Vanessa came to the ranch. He had seen Cole's face. He knew where to find him. Cole hoped the man was not on his trail, but he did not count on it. He slept in short stretches, waking at every sound. An owl called from somewhere in the dark. A coyote yipped in the distance. The horses shifted and stamped, and Cole's hand found the rifle each time. By dawn, he was exhausted, but he pushed on. The second day was harder. The heat came early, a dry furnace blast that seemed to suck the moisture from his skin. The horses moved slower. The roan began to limp slightly, a stone caught in its hoof that Cole had to stop and pry out with his knife. He was covered in dust, his shirt dark with sweat, his throat raw from swallowing the grit that hung in the air. Around noon, he came to a crossroads, a dirt track that intersected the main trail, with a signpost that had been weathered to illegibility. He reined in Buck and studied the ground. There were fresh tracks on the crossroad, maybe a day old, a wagon, 2 horses, heading in the same direction he was. He could not be sure it was Vanessa, but he did not like the coincidence. He pushed harder. The roan began to flag, so he switched to Buck full time, letting the roan follow on a lead line. Buck was stronger, fresher, and Cole rode him with his hand on the reins and his eyes scanning the horizon. The sun was past its peak when he saw the first sign of Blackwell's, a plume of smoke rising from a chimney, then the shape of buildings, small and scattered against the barren ground. He slowed as he approached, not wanting to ride in at a gallop and attract attention. He let Buck walk, and he kept his hat low over his eyes. Blackwell's was a small town, the kind that had grown up around a stagecoach stop and survived by sheer stubbornness. A main street with a saloon, a general store, a livery, and a church. A few side streets with houses. The White House at the end of the road, the one Emma's father had lived in, was visible from the edge of town, sitting on a low rise, its windows dark and empty. Cole rode up to the house. He dismounted and tied the horses to a cottonwood out of sight from the road. The house was quiet. The front door was locked, but the back door swung open at a push, the wood swollen with age and heat. He stepped inside. The house smelled of dust and abandonment. The furniture was still there, draped in sheets. A layer of fine grit covered everything. He moved through the rooms, his boots echoing on the wooden floors, and found the bedroom at the back of the house. The rug on the floor was old and faded. He rolled it back, revealing the floorboards. He found the loose one near the corner, worked his knife into the seam, and pried it up. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth, was a bundle. Cole lifted it out. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a sheaf of papers bound with twine, a leather journal, and a small canvas bag that clinked when he set it down. He did not open the bag. He did not need to. He knew what it was. He sat down on the edge of the bed and began to read the papers. They were legal documents, drawn up by a lawyer in Tucson, establishing a trust for Emma Brooks and any future siblings. The trust named the lawyer as trustee and explicitly stated that Vanessa Brooks was entitled to nothing. There was a will, signed by Emma's father, leaving everything to his children. There was a letter, sealed with wax, addressed to Emma. Cole did not open the letter. That was for her. He opened the journal instead. The handwriting grew worse as the entries went on, the letters shaky and uneven. He skimmed through, looking for the passages that mattered. He found them in the final pages, written in the last weeks before the man's death. Vanessa changed my medicine again. The doctor says nothing helps, but it's worse when she gives it. I think she is poisoning me. I cannot prove it. I am too weak to fight. I pray Emma remembers the floor. I pray she grows up strong. I pray God forgives me for letting her mother into this house. And another entry 2 days later. Eli Driscoll came today. He sat in the parlor. I could hear them talking. She thinks I am asleep. She wants me dead before the end of the month. I do not know how much time I have left. I have written a letter to Emma. I have told her everything. I hope she finds it before Vanessa does. I hope she knows I loved her. Cole closed the journal. He sat there, holding it in his hands, and he felt something break in his chest. The man had known. He had known he was being killed, and he could not stop it. He had been trapped in his own bed, in his own home, surrounded by a woman who smiled while she poured poison into his soup. And the only thing he could do was hide a letter under the floor. Cole tucked the bundle back into his coat. He stood up. He left the floorboard where it lay and walked out of the room. And as he stepped through the back door, he heard something behind him. The creak of a floorboard in the front of the house. He froze. His hand went to his rifle. The sound came again. A footstep. Slow, deliberate. Someone else was in the house. Cole moved to the side of the hallway, flattening himself against the wall. He raised the rifle, his breath quiet and even. He listened. The footsteps came closer, crossing the parlor, entering the main hallway. A shadow fell across the doorway. "Mr. Turner," said a voice, "I've been looking for you." Cole stepped out of the shadows, his rifle leveled. The man in the doorway wore a black hat. He had a pistol in his hand, but it was pointed at the floor. He was not aiming. "Mr. Driscoll," Cole said. The man in the black hat smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I've got a message from Mrs. Brooks. She wants what you've got." Cole said nothing. His thumb rested on the hammer of his rifle. "She's willing to make you an offer," Driscoll said. "A generous one. Leave the children where they are. Hand over the papers. Ride west and never come back. You'll have enough money to buy a new ranch, a new life, anything you want. She's not unreasonable. She left a 5-year-old and a newborn to die in the desert." Driscoll's smile did not waver. "She's still not unreasonable." Cole raised the rifle an inch. "You tell her she can keep her money. And you tell her something else. The next time I see you, I won't be aiming at your chest. I'll be aiming at your hat. And I won't miss." Driscoll's smile faded. He looked at Cole, and for a moment, something cold passed between them. "You're making a mistake, Turner." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." Driscoll nodded slowly. He backed out of the doorway, his pistol still down. "I'll give her your regards." "Do that." The footsteps retreated. The front door opened and closed. A horse rode away, the hoofbeats fading into the distance. Cole stood in the hallway, his heart pounding, his hands steady. He waited until the silence returned, until he was sure Driscoll was gone. Then he walked out the back door, mounted Buck, and turned the horse north toward home. He had the papers. He had the proof. But he had also seen the coldness in Driscoll's eyes, and he knew that the journey back would not be unguarded. The woman in black had found him, and she knew where he was going. He pushed the horses hard. The sun set behind him, painting the sky in shades of red and purple. He rode through the twilight, through the first hours of darkness, until the moon rose and cast pale light across the prairie. And he did not stop, because behind him, in the night, he thought he heard the sound of hoofbeats following. The hoofbeats behind him grew louder as the moon climbed higher, casting silver light across the prairie. Cole leaned forward in the saddle, urging Buck into a faster pace, but the roan was flagging, its breath coming in ragged heaves. He could not abandon the horse. He needed both animals to make it home, but he could not afford to slow down either. The riders behind him were gaining, their horses fresher, their purpose clear. He reined Buck off the main trail, cutting across open ground toward a dry wash that snaked through the hills. The roan followed, stumbling on the uneven terrain. Cole guided them down into the wash, the sandy bottom soft beneath the horses' hooves. The walls rose on either side, offering cover, but also trapping them in a narrow corridor. If the riders caught them here, there would be nowhere to run. He pushed forward, the wash winding through the darkness. The sound of hoofbeats faded, then returned, echoing off the walls. They were still following. They knew the country. Cole's mind raced. He had the papers. He had the proof that would send Vanessa away and secure Emma and Noah's future. But none of that mattered if he did not make it home. He thought of Emma standing in the doorway, her small hand holding Noah, her eyes asking a question she would not speak aloud. He had crossed his heart. He had promised. And Cole Turner had never broken a promise in his life. The wash opened into a wider valley, scattered with boulders and juniper. Cole pulled up, listening. The hoofbeats had stopped. That was worse. It meant the riders had dismounted, were moving on foot, were trying to surround him. He swung down from Buck and tied the horses to a low branch. He pulled his rifle from the scabbard and crouched behind a boulder, his eyes scanning the darkness. The moon was bright enough to cast shadows, to turn the landscape into a patchwork of black and silver. He could see the shape of the wash entrance, the dark mouths of side canyons, the twisted forms of juniper trees. A stone clicked somewhere to his left. He turned, raising the rifle. A figure moved between two boulders, low and fast. Cole fired. The shot cracked across the valley, echoing off the hills. The figure disappeared. A return shot came, the bullet whining off the rock near his head. Cole ducked, his heart hammering. He counted the shots. One from his rifle, one from theirs. 3 more riders at least, maybe more. He had 30 rounds in his belt and a revolver on his hip. It would have to be enough. "You can't outrun us, Turner," a voice called out. It was Driscoll. "Just give us the papers and we'll let you ride out." Cole did not answer. He shifted position, crawling on his belly to a new spot behind a thicker cluster of rocks. He could see the shape of a horse in the distance, a rider standing beside it. He aimed and fired. The horse reared, and the rider cursed, scrambling for cover. "Last chance, Turner." Cole levered another round into the rifle. "Come and get them." Silence. Then the sound of boots moving through gravel, spreading out. They were flanking him. Cole knew he could not hold them off forever. He needed to reach the horses, to make a break for open ground. But the horses were exposed, tied to a tree that offered little protection. If the riders got close enough, they would shoot the animals, and he would be stranded. He made a decision. He crawled back to the horses, keeping low, using the boulders for cover. He untied Buck and swung up into the saddle, leaving the roan tied. He would have to risk it. He spurred Buck forward, driving the horse up out of the valley, across the open ground toward the next ridge. The riders saw him. Shots rang out, but the range was long, and the moonlight played tricks with depth. Buck ran flat out, his hooves drumming against the hard earth. Cole leaned low over his neck, his rifle in one hand, the reins in the other. The wind tore at his face, and the bullets sang past him, and he thought of nothing but the trail ahead and the house at the end of it. They chased him for another mile, but the gap widened. Buck was stronger than he looked, his heart bigger than his frame. The riders fell back, their horses tiring. Finally, the hoofbeats faded, and Cole was alone under the stars. He did not slow down. He kept Buck at a canter, then a walk, then a canter again, pushing through the night. He did not stop to rest until the first gray light of dawn touched the eastern sky. Then he dismounted, walked Buck in a circle to cool him, and drank from his canteen. He fed the horse a handful of grain from the saddlebag, speaking to him in a low, steady voice. Good boy, we're going to make it." "We're going to make it home." Buck blew through his nostrils, his sides heaving. Cole leaned his forehead against the horse's neck and closed his eyes. He was exhausted, his muscles aching, his eyes gritty with lack of sleep, but he could not rest, not yet. He mounted up and rode on. The second day of the return journey was worse than the first. The heat was brutal, the sun a white disk in a sky that had no mercy. Cole rationed his water, giving most of it to Buck, who was beginning to show signs of strain. The horse's gait was uneven, his head low. Cole pushed him gently, but he knew he was asking too much. Around noon he came to a creek, little more than a trickle, but enough. He let Buck drink, and he refilled his canteens. He sat on the bank, his boots off, his feet in the cool water, and he ate the last of the hardtack. He thought about Emma. He thought about what she would be doing right now. Maybe sitting on the porch, watching the horizon. Maybe holding Noah, telling him stories their daddy used to tell. Maybe asking Martha for the 10th time when he would be back. He thought about what he would say to her when he walked through the door. He would kneel down and look her in the eye and tell her that he had found the papers, that she was safe, that Vanessa could never hurt her again. He would hand her the letter from her daddy, sealed with wax, and he would watch her read it, and he would be there when she cried. That vision carried him through the rest of the day. By sunset, he was within 20 miles of the ranch. He could feel it in the way the land changed, the familiar shapes of the hills, the bend in the trail where he had first found Emma. He pushed on into the night, too close to stop. The moon was high when he saw the lights of the ranch house, small and warm in the distance. He urged Buck forward, and the horse responded, finding a last reserve of strength. They crossed the final stretch of open ground, passed the corral, and stopped at the porch. Cole slid off the horse. His legs buckled, and he caught himself on the rail. He stood there a moment, breathing, letting the reality of being home wash over him. The door opened. Martha stood in the doorway, a lamp in her hand. Her face went through a series of changes. Relief, concern, then relief again. "Cole Turner, you look like a ghost. Feel like one, too." "Is it done?" He patted his coat. "Got it all. Papers, journal, everything." Martha closed her eyes and let out a breath. "Thank the Lord. Where's Emma?" "Sleeping. She wouldn't go to bed until past midnight. Kept asking if I'd seen any sign of you. I told her you'd be back. She didn't believe me." Cole walked into the house. He went down the hallway to his bedroom and pushed the door open. The lamp was turned low, casting a soft glow. Emma was curled up in the middle of his bed, her hand tucked under her cheek. Noah was beside her in the cradle, his face peaceful in sleep. Cole stood in the doorway, watching her breathe. He did not move for a long time. Martha came up behind him. "You going to wake her?" "No. Let her sleep." "You need to sleep too." "I will, soon." But he did not sleep. He sat in the chair by the bed, the same chair he had sat in the first night, and he watched her breathe until the dawn began to creep through the window. Somewhere in those hours, the exhaustion caught up with him, and his eyes closed. He woke to the sound of a small voice. "Cowboy Dad?" He opened his eyes. Emma was standing beside the chair, her face inches from his. She had her hand on his arm, her fingers light as bird bones. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would, Miss Emma." "You was gone a long time." 4 days. That's a long time, I know." She looked at him seriously. "I was scared." "I know you were. I'm sorry." "You don't got to be sorry. You came back." He reached out and put his hand on her shoulder. She did not flinch. She leaned into it, just a little. "Miss Emma, I found something in your daddy's house. Something he left for you." Her eyes widened. "The papers?" "The papers, and something else." He reached into his coat and pulled out the sealed letter. It was crumpled, but the wax was intact. "This is for you. He wrote it before he died. I didn't open it. It's yours." Emma stared at the letter. She did not reach for it. She stared at it like it was something that might burn her. "I don't know if I can read it," she whispered. "You don't have to read it now. You can read it when you're ready. It'll keep. It's been waiting for you a long time. It can wait a little longer." She nodded slowly. She took the letter from his hand. She held it against her chest, both hands wrapped around it, and looked down at it. "Did you read the journal?" she asked. "Parts of it." "Did he say he loved me?" Yes, Miss Emma, he said it many times. She closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. She did not wipe it away. I knew he did, she said. I knew it. She opened her eyes and looked at him. Vanessa didn't find the papers? No, she didn't. She sent a man after me. He didn't get them either. He was the one in the black hat? Yes. He's bad, Cowboy Dad. He's real bad. I know, but he didn't get the papers, and he's not going to. Emma looked at him. What happens now? Now we go to Phoenix. We get a judge to see these papers. We make them official. And then Vanessa never gets to touch you or Noah ever again. Emma nodded. She looked down at the letter in her hands. Then she looked at the cradle where Noah was stirring. Then she looked at Cole, and she did something that made his chest ache. She smiled. It was small, barely a flicker, but it was real. I'm glad you came back, Cowboy Dad. I'm glad I came back too, Miss Emma. The days that followed were a strange mixture of calm and tension. Cole recovered from the ride, sleeping long hours, eating Martha's cooking, and letting his body mend. He took the papers to Doc Whitfield, who read them and nodded slowly. This is ironclad, Cole. This is a gold mine. Vanessa doesn't stand a chance. The lawyer in Tucson needs to see them. Holloway, the one who drew up the trust, he's the key. Then we need to get them to him. I'll ride to Tucson tomorrow. I'll hire a rider if I have to. But the next morning, before Cole could saddle Buck, a wagon rolled up the road from the south. It was not Vanessa's wagon. It was a plain buckboard driven by a man in a dusty suit, with a woman beside him who held a parasol against the sun. They stopped at the porch, and the man climbed down. Mr. Turner? That's me. My name is Alistair Finch. I'm an attorney representing the Territorial Court in matters of child welfare. This is my associate, Mrs. Hargrave. Cole's hand tightened on the porch rail. I wasn't expecting visitors. These matters rarely announce themselves, sir. I'm here regarding the minor children, Emma and Noah Brooks. Their case has been flagged by the Territorial Office. I've been sent to conduct a preliminary home visit. Cole looked at Martha, who had come out of the house, wiping her hands on her apron. He looked at the attorney, a thin man with spectacles and a nose that seemed designed for looking down at things. Come in, Cole said. We'll talk inside. The attorney and Mrs. Hargrave stepped into the house. Mrs. Hargrave was a woman of about 50, with graying hair and a face that had been trained to show nothing. She carried a small notebook and a pencil, and she looked around the kitchen with the practiced eye of someone who had seen 1,000 homes. May we see the children? She asked. They're in the back, Martha said. I'll get them. She brought Emma into the kitchen first. Emma was wearing a dress that Martha had cleaned and mended, her hair brushed and braided. She looked at the strangers with a wariness that had not yet left her face. Emma, Mrs. Hargrave said, kneeling down to her level. My name is Mrs. Hargrave. I'm here to make sure you're all right. Do you know what that means? Yes, ma'am, Emma said. But I can tell you right now I'm fine. Mr. Cole takes good care of me. He gives me food and a bed, and he doesn't hit me. The words hung in the air. Mrs. Hargrave's face did not change, but her pencil moved across the notebook. That's very good to hear, Emma. Can you tell me a little bit about what a normal day is like here? Emma looked at Cole. He nodded. She turned back to Mrs. Hargrave. I wake up. I eat breakfast. Martha lets me help with the biscuits. I feed Noah. I go outside and watch the horses. Mr. Cole shows me how to rope fence posts. I like that. Then we eat supper, and then he reads to me from a book about cowboys. Then I go to sleep. That sounds very nice, Emma. Have you been scared since you came here? No, ma'am, not scared, just worried. Worried about what? Worried that someone's going to take me away. Mrs. Hargrave's pencil stopped. She looked at Emma, and something softened in her face. Has anyone told you that you might be taken away? Vanessa. She said she was going to come back and get me. She said she had papers and lawyers, and she would take me and Noah and put us in a home. And do you believe that? Emma shook her head. Not anymore. Not since Cowboy Dad came back with the papers from my daddy's house. He's got proof. He's going to show the judge. Mrs. Hargrave looked at Cole. Mr. Turner, what papers is she referring to? Cole reached into his coat and laid the bundle on the table. He unwrapped the oilcloth and spread out the legal documents, the journal, the sealed letter. These are the papers her father left for her. A trust, established before his death, leaving everything to Emma and her brother. Plus a journal he kept while he was dying, documenting how his wife was poisoning him. Plus, a sealed letter to his daughter. I found them under the floor of his house in Blackwell's, where he hid them. Mrs. Hargrave and Mr. Finch exchanged a glance. Finch stepped forward and picked up the trust document, reading it carefully. His expression changed as he read. He set it down and picked up the journal. "This handwriting is very weak," he said. "He was dying, sir. He knew he was being killed. He wrote down what he could." Finch read several pages. When he finished, he set the journal down and took off his spectacles. "Mr. Turner, I came here expecting to find a typical case of a single man trying to claim children for reasons of labor or charity. I did not expect this. Reckon not many people would. This changes things. This is evidence of a serious crime. The territorial court will have to review it, but I can tell you now that the stepmother's claim is very likely void." "Good. That's what I've been saying." But Mrs. Hargrave was still studying Emma. She knelt down again. "Emma, can you show me where you sleep?" Emma led her to the bedroom. Mrs. Hargrave looked at the bed, the cradle, the window, the chair in the corner. She looked at the rag doll Martha had sewn for Emma, propped on the pillow. She looked at the small pair of boots beside the bed, bought by Cole in town the day before. "Do you feel safe here, Emma?" "Yes, ma'am." "All the time?" "All the time." Mrs. Hargrave wrote in her notebook. She nodded at Emma and walked back to the kitchen. "Mr. Turner, we've seen enough. I'll make my report to the court. I can't guarantee the outcome, but I will say that your home appears to be a stable and caring environment for these children. The evidence you've presented will be forwarded to the judge handling the custody case. I believe the hearing is set for 3 weeks from today in Phoenix. I'll be there." "Good. We'll be in touch." They left. Cole stood on the porch, watching the wagon disappear down the road, and he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The report would be good. The evidence was strong. He had a lawyer, a community of supporters, and the truth on his side. But as he turned to go back inside, he saw something on the horizon that made him stop. A plume of dust, moving fast. A single rider coming from the south. And as the rider drew closer, Cole recognized the horse, the hat, the set of the shoulders. It was Driscoll. Cole's hand went to his rifle. He stepped off the porch and walked into the yard, positioning himself between the rider and the house. Driscoll pulled up 20 feet away and sat in the saddle, his hands empty, his face unreadable. "Mr. Turner." "Driscoll, I thought I told you not to come back." "You did. I'm not here on her business." "Then why are you here?" Driscoll looked at the house. He looked at the window where Emma's face had appeared, peeking through the curtain. "I came to tell you something. Something you need to know." Driscoll sat his horse in the yard, his hands resting on the saddle horn, his face a mask of something that might have been regret. The wind stirred the dust around his boots, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ground. Cole kept his hand on the rifle, but he did not raise it. Something in Driscoll's voice had changed. The cold confidence from their last meeting was gone, replaced by a weariness that seemed bone-deep. "I'm listening," Cole said. Driscoll looked at the house again. "Can we talk somewhere private? Not in front of the girl?" Cole studied him. He could see the tension in Driscoll's shoulders, the way his jaw was clenched. This was not a man who had come to fight. This was a man who had come to unburden himself. "Round the back of the barn. I'll meet you there." Driscoll nodded. He turned his horse and rode toward the barn, moving slow. Cole watched him go, then walked to the house and stepped inside. Martha was at the stove, Emma at the table with Noah in her lap. "I need to talk to that man outside," Cole said. "Miss Emma, you stay in the house with Martha. Don't come out till I come for you." Emma's eyes went wide. "Is he the one? The black hat?" "Yes." "Don't trust him, cowboy dad." "I don't, but I need to hear what he's got to say." She looked at him with those dark eyes that held too much knowledge. Then she nodded. "Be careful." "I always am." He walked out the back door and circled around to the barn. Driscoll was standing beside his horse, his hat off, his hair plastered to his head with sweat. He looked older than he had before, the lines in his face deeper, the shadows under his eyes darker. "Turner," Driscoll said, I know you got no reason to trust me, and I ain't asking you to, but I got something to say, and I need you to hear it. Say it. Vanessa ain't done. She's got a lawyer from Tucson now, name of Pemberton. He's a snake, but he's a smart snake. He's already filed a motion to have the trust documents thrown out on account of they were hidden and not filed with the territorial court. He's claiming your evidence was obtained illegally, that you broke into the house and stole private property. Cole's jaw tightened. I found them under the floor. They belong to the children's father. That don't matter to Pemberton. He's going to argue that you tampered with the evidence, that you wrote the journal entries yourself to frame her. He's going to paint you as a desperate man who saw an opportunity to steal a fortune by taking in the children. That's a lie. I know it's a lie, but Pemberton don't care about the truth. He cares about winning, and he's got the territorial court's ear. The judge assigned to the case is named Harlan Pike. He's a fair man, mostly, but he's got a reputation for sticking to procedure. If Pemberton can make a procedural argument stick, Pike might rule against you. Cole leaned against the barn wall, his arms crossed. Why are you telling me this? Driscoll looked at the ground. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because I was there, in the house, when the old man was dying. I saw what she did. I saw her put the powder in his soup. I heard her talking to the doctor, telling him to look the other way. I didn't stop her. I took her money, and I rode away, and I told myself it wasn't my business. He looked up. But it was my business. I was there. I could have said something. I could have stopped it. And I didn't. Cole said nothing. He let the silence stretch. I've been carrying that for months, Driscoll continued. It's been eating me alive. And then I saw that little girl, standing in the doorway of the house that day when we came for her. She looked at me, and I saw the old man's eyes in her face, and I knew I couldn't keep running. So what do you want from me? I want to testify, at the hearing. I want to tell the judge what I saw, what she did. I want to put her away for good. Cole studied him. He could see the pain in Driscoll's face, the weight of years of bad choices. But he could also see something else, a flicker of decency, buried deep, trying to claw its way out. You know that if you testify, you're admitting to being an accomplice. You could go to prison. I know. You're willing to do that? Driscoll met his eyes. I'm willing to do that. Cole pushed off from the barn wall. He walked a few steps away, his hand running through his hair, his mind turning over the possibilities. If Driscoll testified, it would be the nail in Vanessa's coffin. A witness, a confession, corroboration of the journal. But it would also be dangerous. Pemberton would tear into Driscoll on cross-examination. He would try to paint him as a liar, a man looking to save his own skin, and Driscoll's testimony would only be as good as his credibility. You got a lawyer? Cole asked. No. Then you need one. If you're going to testify, you need someone who can protect your rights. Make sure you don't get hung out to dry. I ain't got money for a lawyer. I do. There's a trust. Emma's trust. I can't use it for myself, but I can use it to hire a lawyer for a witness who's testifying on her behalf. I'll make it work. Driscoll looked at him, something like surprise flickering across his face. You'd do that? After everything? I'd do a lot of things to make sure that little girl never has to be afraid again. Driscoll nodded slowly. He put his hat back on and settled it low over his eyes. I'll ride to Tucson. I'll find this Holloway lawyer, the one who drew up the trust. I'll tell him everything. He can decide how to use it. Good. Driscoll mounted his horse. He looked down at Cole, and for a moment something passed between them. Not friendship, not trust, but something like an understanding. Turner, Driscoll said, you're a better man than me. Reckon we'll see. Driscoll turned his horse and rode out of the yard, heading south toward Tucson. Cole watched him go, then walked back to the house. Emma was waiting at the door, her face pale. Is he gone? He's gone. He's going to help us. How? He's going to tell the judge what he saw, what Vanessa did to your daddy. Emma's eyes widened. He saw? He saw, and he's going to tell the truth. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Daddy used to say that the truth always comes out, even if it takes a long time. Your daddy was right. She looked up at him. "Are we going to win, Cowboy Dad?" Cole crouched down and put his hand on her shoulder. "We're going to fight like we've never fought before, and we're going to give that judge every piece of evidence, every witness, every word of truth we can find. And then we're going to let him decide. But I'll tell you this, Miss Emma, I ain't letting you go. Not to Vanessa, not to any orphanage, not to anyone. You and Noah are mine now, and I don't give up what's mine." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck, her small body pressed against his chest. She did not cry. She just held on, and Cole held her back, his big arms gentle around her fragile frame. Martha appeared in the doorway, holding Noah. She looked at them, and her eyes glistened. She did not say anything. She just turned and went back inside, leaving them alone on the porch. The days that followed were a blur of preparation. Cole rode to Tucson and met with Mr. Holloway, the lawyer who had drawn up the trust. Holloway was a thin man with sharp eyes and a voice that carried the weight of 1,000 courtrooms. He listened to Cole's story, read the documents, and nodded slowly. "Mr. Turner, this is the strongest case I've seen in years. The trust is airtight. The journal is damning. And now you have a witness willing to testify? That's extraordinary. Can we win? Barring an act of God or a corrupt judge, yes. But we need to be careful. Pemberton is a skilled attorney. He'll try to discredit everything. We need to present the evidence in a way that leaves no room for doubt. Do what you need to do." Holloway set to work. He filed motions, prepared briefs, and sent letters to the territorial court. He interviewed Driscoll, who had arrived in Tucson and given a full statement. He deposed Doc Whitfield, who testified to the condition of the children when they were brought to the ranch. He gathered affidavits from the 43 neighbors who had signed the petition. Cole returned to the ranch and waited. The days were long, filled with work and worry. He taught Emma how to ride, sitting her on a gentle mare named Daisy and walking beside her as she learned to hold the reins. He read to her at night, stories about cowboys and pioneers, and she listened with her head on his shoulder, her eyes heavy with sleep. One evening, after supper, Emma brought out the sealed letter from her father. She held it in her hands, turning it over and over. "Cowboy Dad?" "Yes, Miss Emma." "I think I'm ready to read it now." Cole nodded. He lit a lamp and set it on the table. Emma sat down, her small fingers working the wax seal. It cracked and fell away. She unfolded the paper, and her eyes moved across the words. The letter was written in the same shaky hand as the journal. It was not long. 3 paragraphs. The ink faded and smudged. "My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, I am gone. I am sorry I could not stay with you longer. I wanted to watch you grow up. I wanted to see you become the strong, kind woman I know you will be. But the Lord had other plans, and I am at peace with that. There is something you must know. The woman I married, Vanessa, she is not who she pretends to be. She has done terrible things. She has tried to take what is ours. But I have hidden the proof. It is under the floor in the bedroom. You must find it and give it to someone you trust. It will protect you. I love you, Emma. I have loved you from the moment you were born. You were the best thing I ever did in this world. Take care of your brother, be brave, and remember that I am always with you, in your heart and in the wind. Your father, Samuel Brooks." Emma read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and pressed it against her chest. She did not cry. She sat very still, her eyes closed, her lips moving silently. Cole did not speak. He sat beside her and waited. After a long time, Emma opened her eyes. She looked at him, and her voice was steady. "He said he loved me. I know he did. He said to be brave. He knew you would be." She looked down at the letter. "I'm going to keep this forever." "That's a good idea, Miss Emma." She slipped the letter into the pocket of her dress, the same pocket where she used to hide biscuits. Then she looked at Cole. "I want to be brave for the hearing. I want to tell the judge what happened. I want to say it out loud so everyone hears." Cole's throat tightened. "You don't have to do that, sweetheart. We got the papers. We got Driscoll. You don't have to speak if you don't want to." "I know, but I want to. Daddy said to be brave. So I'm going to be brave." Cole reached out and took her hand. "Then I'll be right beside you, Miss Emma, every step of the way." She squeezed his hand. It was a small squeeze, but it was strong. 3 days before the hearing, a rider came from Tucson with a message from Mr. Holloway. The lawyer had written it himself, his handwriting neat and urgent. "Mr. Turner, there has been a development. Pemberton has filed a motion to have the hearing moved to a different venue, citing prejudice in the local court. He is trying to delay the proceedings." Judge Pike has denied the motion, but Pemberton has appealed to the Territorial Supreme Court. The appeal could take weeks. The children may be placed in temporary custody during that time. I am doing everything I can to fight this, but I need you to prepare for the possibility that the hearing may be postponed. If that happens, the Territorial Office may try to remove the children to a temporary home. I will do my best to prevent it, but I cannot promise anything. Stay strong. I will write again soon. Holloway Cole read the letter twice. He set it down on the table and stared at the wall. Emma was outside, playing with a rope she was learning to use for roping fence posts. He could hear her laughter, high and bright, a sound that had become more common in the past weeks. Martha came up behind him and read the letter over his shoulder. "What does it mean?" she asked. "It means they're trying to slow us down. They're hoping we'll run out of time, or money, or hope. Can they take the children? They can try." Martha was quiet. Then she said, "Cole, what are you going to do?" He picked up the letter, folded it, and put it in his pocket. "I'm going to fight. That's what I'm going to do." But as he walked out onto the porch and watched Emma chasing a butterfly across the yard, he felt the cold hand of fear grip his heart. He had promised her she would never be taken away, and he would die before he broke that promise. But he was beginning to realize that dying might not be enough. He needed to win. He stood on the porch, watching the sun begin to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The wind carried the smell of dust and sage, the familiar scent of home. And somewhere out there, in a city far away, a woman in a black dress was plotting her next move, her lawyers sharpening their knives, her eyes fixed on the same prize. Cole Turner had never been a man who prayed. But that evening, standing on his porch with the weight of 2 children on his shoulders, he bowed his head and asked the Almighty for a little help. He did not ask for much, just enough time, just enough justice, just enough strength to carry them through. And then he went inside to eat supper with his family. The morning of departure came gray and cool, a rare overcast sky pressing low over the ranch. Emma stood on the porch with her small bundle of belongings wrapped in a cloth sack. Her rag doll, the letter from her daddy, and a biscuit she had saved from breakfast, tucked into her pocket out of habit, even though Martha had assured her there would be plenty of food in Phoenix. She wore the best dress Martha had mended for her, a blue calico that had once belonged to someone else's daughter, and her hair was braided tight and neat. She looked like a different child from the one Cole had found in the dust 2 weeks earlier. But her eyes were the same, old and watchful, and full of things no 5-year-old should have to carry. Cole hitched the roan and the spare to the wagon, then secured Buck to the back. He wanted the big bay in Phoenix in case he needed to ride fast for any reason. Martha stood in the doorway with Noah in her arms, the baby wrapped in a clean blanket, his cheeks pink and round from the weeks of steady feeding. "You got everything?" Martha asked. "I got everything," Cole said. "The papers?" "In my coat, wrapped in oilcloth. They ain't leaving my side." "Dr. Whitfield's testimony?" "Written down and signed." "Driscoll?" "He's meeting us in Tucson. Holloway's got him sequestered, keeping him away from Pemberton's people." Martha nodded. She looked at Emma, who had not moved from the porch. "You take care of your cowboy dad, you hear, Miss Emma?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you remember what I told you. You stand up straight. You look the judge in the eye. And you tell the truth because the truth is on your side." "I remember." Martha stepped forward and knelt down, shifting Noah to one arm so she could put her free hand on Emma's cheek. "You are the bravest little girl I have ever known, Emma Brooks, and I am proud to have you in my house." Emma's lip trembled. She did not cry. She leaned into Martha's hand for a moment, then pulled back and climbed into the wagon seat. Cole helped Martha hand Noah up to Emma, who settled the baby in her lap with the practiced ease of someone who had been holding him since the day he was born. Then Cole swung up onto the wagon seat beside her, took the reins, and clicked his tongue. The wagon lurched forward. They rolled out of the yard, past the corral, past the barn, onto the long road that led south toward Tucson and then west to Phoenix. Emma did not look back. She stared straight ahead, her small hands holding Noah secure, her jaw set in a line that reminded Cole of a general marching to war. The first day of travel was quiet. Cole did not push the horses hard. The wagon was heavy, and the road was rough. They stopped at midday to rest and eat the cold biscuits and dried beef Martha had packed. Emma fed Noah from a bottle of milk they had kept cool in a wrapped cloth. The baby drank greedily, his eyes fixed on Emma's face with the blind trust of the very young. "You reckon he knows what's happening?" Emma asked. "He knows you're here. That's all he needs to know. He's getting big. Look at his legs, they're getting fat. He's getting fed. That's what matters." Emma smiled, a real smile, small but genuine. She touched Noah's cheek, and he grabbed her finger with his tiny hand. "You're going to be a strong one, Noah Brooks, just like Daddy said." They camped that night under a stand of cottonwoods near a dry creek bed. Cole built a small fire, more for comfort than for warmth, and they sat by it as the stars came out. Emma was quiet, her eyes on the flames. "Cowboy Dad? Yeah. What if the judge doesn't believe us?" Cole poked the fire with a stick. "Then we keep fighting. We appeal. We take it to a higher court. We do whatever it takes. But what if they take us away before we can do that?" He looked at her. The firelight flickered across her face, casting shadows that made her look older, more fragile. "Miss Emma, I need you to listen to me. I've been thinking about that, and I've made a decision." She looked up at him. "If the judge rules against us, I'm not letting them take you. I'll take you and Noah, and we'll ride. We'll go somewhere they can't find us. The mountains, maybe, or down into Mexico. I got friends in places. We'll make a life." "You'd do that?" "I'd do that and more." "But that's breaking the law. I'd break 100 laws before I let them put you in a home." Emma was quiet. She looked into the fire. "My daddy said the law was supposed to protect people. That's what he believed. Most of the time it does, but sometimes the law gets it wrong. And when it does, a man's got to do what's right, even if it ain't legal. Is that what you're going to do?" "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure the law gets it right. But if it don't, yes, that's what I'm going to do." Emma nodded slowly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the biscuit she had saved. She held it for a moment, then held it out to Cole. "You want this?" "I got my own supper, Miss Emma." "I know, but I want you to have it, for the road." Cole took the biscuit. It was hard and stale, but he ate it because she had offered it, and because he understood what it meant. She was sharing her safety, her provision, the thing she had learned to hoard against a world that had never given her enough. He ate it slowly, and when he was done he said, "Thank you, Miss Emma. That's the best biscuit I ever had." She almost smiled, almost. She leaned against his arm, and they sat together by the fire until the embers died and the stars wheeled overhead. The second day brought them to the outskirts of Tucson. The town was larger than Blackwell's, with real brick buildings and a proper hotel. Cole pulled the wagon up in front of Mr. Holloway's office, a 2-story building with a brass sign that read, "Holloway and Associates, Attorneys at Law." Holloway met them at the door. He was a thin man with spectacles and a receding hairline, but his handshake was firm and his eyes were sharp. "Mr. Turner, Miss Emma, please come in." The office was lined with bookshelves, the air smelling of paper and ink and old leather. Holloway gestured to chairs, and Emma sat down carefully, still holding Noah. Cole remained standing, his hat in his hands. "I've received word from Judge Pike's clerk," Holloway said. "The hearing is confirmed for the day after tomorrow at 9 in the morning. Pemberton's motion to delay was denied by the Territorial Supreme Court yesterday. We're moving forward." "That's good news." "It is, but there's something else. Mrs. Brooks has retained an additional attorney, a man named Jeremiah Vance. He's a former prosecutor, well-respected, known for his aggressive cross-examination. He's not someone to take lightly." Cole's jaw tightened. What does that mean for us? It means they're bringing heavy artillery. But we have the evidence. We have the journal. We have Driscoll. And we have something they don't have. What's that? Holloway looked at Emma. We have the truth. Emma met his gaze. She did not look away. Holloway smiled, a thin, tired smile. Miss Emma, I've been practicing law for 25 years. I've seen a lot of witnesses. Some of them were honest. Most of them were lying. You can always tell the difference if you know what to look for. And I look at you, and I see a child who has nothing to hide. That's powerful. More powerful than any piece of paper. I want to testify, Emma said. I know, and I think you should. But I want you to understand what that means. Mr. Vance will ask you questions, hard questions. He'll try to confuse you, to make you say things you don't mean. Are you ready for that? Emma thought about it. She looked down at Noah, who was sleeping in her arms, his tiny chest rising and falling. She looked at Cole. Then she looked back at Holloway. I've been asked hard questions before, Mr. Holloway. I've been asked questions by people who wanted to hurt me, and I didn't break then. I won't break now. Holloway studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I believe you. They spent the night in a boarding house on the edge of town. Emma shared a room with Noah, while Cole took a small room down the hall. He did not sleep. He sat by the window, watching the street, his rifle propped against the wall. The town was quiet, but he did not trust the quiet. Vanessa had money, connections, people who would do things for pay. She knew they were here. He could feel it. Around midnight, he heard a soft knock on his door. He crossed the room and opened it. Emma stood in the hallway in her nightgown, holding Noah, her face pale in the lamplight. I can't sleep, she said. Come in. She walked into the room and climbed onto his bed. She set Noah beside her, propped against the pillow, and pulled the blanket up over both of them. You going to sit up all night again? She asked. Probably. Can I stay here? Long as you want, Miss Emma. She lay down, her head on the pillow, her hand resting on Noah's back. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'm scared, Cowboy Dad. I know you are, but I'm not as scared as I used to be. Before, I was scared all the time, every minute. In the house with Vanessa, I was scared to breathe too loud. Now I'm only scared some of the time. That's progress. Maybe. She rolled onto her side, looking at him. You think Daddy is watching? I think your daddy is watching from the best seat in the house, and I think he's proud of you. She closed her eyes. I hope so. She fell asleep a few minutes later. Cole stayed by the window, watching the street, until the first light of dawn touched the rooftops. The journey to Phoenix took another day and a half. They arrived in the early evening, the city sprawling before them, bigger and busier than anything Emma had ever seen. The streets were crowded with wagons and carriages and people on foot. Buildings rose 2 and 3 stories high. The courthouse stood at the center of the city, a grand stone structure with columns and a dome that caught the light of the setting sun. Cole pulled the wagon up to a hotel near the courthouse. Holloway had arranged the rooms, paid for from the trust. They checked in, and Cole carried Noah while Emma walked beside him, her hand gripping his coat. She was trying to be brave, but her eyes were wide, and she stayed close. The next morning they walked to the courthouse. The steps were crowded with people, reporters, curious townsfolk, a few familiar faces from the ranch who had made the journey to show support. Old Joe Caldwell was there, and the Wallace brothers. Reverend Hayes stood near the door, his Bible in his hand. Emma walked up the steps with her head held high. She wore the same blue dress. Her hair was braided. She carried nothing but herself. The courtroom was packed. The benches were full. A murmur ran through the crowd as they entered. Cole spotted Vanessa at the defendant's table, dressed in black, her face composed and cold. Beside her sat a man in an expensive suit, thin and sharp-featured. That would be Pemberton. On his other side sat a larger man with a square jaw and steady eyes, Jeremiah Vance. Vanessa's eyes found Emma. She stared at her with an intensity that made Cole's hand tighten on his daughter's shoulder. Emma did not look away. She met Vanessa's gaze, held it for a long moment, and then turned her head and walked to her seat at the plaintiff's table. Judge Pike entered. Everyone stood. He was a large man with a heavy face and a voice that carried without effort. He sat down, arranged his robes, and looked at the room. This court is now in session, the matter of Brooks versus the Territory of Arizona regarding the custody and welfare of the minor children Emma Brooks and Noah Brooks. Mr. Holloway, you may begin your opening statement. Holloway stood. He walked to the front of the courtroom, his hands clasped behind his back. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, this case is about one thing, the truth. The truth of what happened to Samuel Brooks, a man who was slowly poisoned by the woman he trusted. The truth of what happened to his children, abandoned in the desert to die. And the truth of what happened after, when a rancher named Cole Turner found them and gave them a home. He paused, looking at the jury box. The evidence will show that the defendant, Vanessa Brooks, systematically abused and neglected these children, that she attempted to murder their father, that she left them in the desert with no water, no food, and no hope, and that she has since tried to use the courts to cover up her crimes. He turned to face Vanessa. We will prove, beyond any reasonable doubt, that she is unfit to be a mother. And we will ask this court to grant full custody of Emma and Noah Brooks to Cole Turner, the man who saved their lives. He sat down. Pemberton rose. He was smooth, his voice like oil on water. Your Honor, the Territory's case is built on hearsay, speculation, and the testimony of a man who has admitted to being a criminal. They have no direct evidence that Mrs. Brooks harmed her husband. The journal they claim to have found could have been written by anyone. And Mr. Turner, the man seeking custody, broke into a home and stole private property. Is this the kind of man we want raising children? He shook his head. We will show that Mrs. Brooks is a grieving widow who has been slandered by a desperate man seeking to steal her family's fortune. We will show that the children were with her voluntarily and that their abandonment was a tragic accident. And we will ask this court to return them to their rightful mother. He sat down. Judge Pike looked at Holloway. Call your first witness. Holloway stood. The Territory calls Dr. Elias Whitfield. Doc Whitfield walked to the stand. He was sworn in, and he sat down, his hands folded in his lap. Doctor. Whitfield, Holloway began, you examined the children shortly after they were brought to Mr. Turner's ranch. Can you describe their condition? Doc spoke slowly, carefully, detailing the bruises, the dehydration, the malnourishment. He described the pattern of abuse, the old injuries layered over new. He described the baby's condition, the dehydration that had nearly killed him. And in your professional opinion, doctor, could these injuries have been caused by a wagon accident, as the defendant claims? No. These injuries were caused by repeated, deliberate physical abuse over a period of months. Could they have been caused by a fall? Not with this pattern. The bruises on the arms are consistent with someone gripping and shaking. The marks on the back are consistent with a strap or a switch. The injury to the jaw is consistent with a slap or a punch. And the baby's dehydration? That was caused by exposure and lack of feeding. A newborn cannot survive more than a day without adequate fluids. He was hours from death when he was brought in. Holloway nodded. Thank you, doctor. Pemberton rose for cross-examination. He was calm, deliberate. Doctor. Whitfield, you testified that the injuries were caused by abuse, but you cannot say with certainty who caused them, can you? The pattern suggests a single caregiver over time, but you were not present when the injuries occurred. You did not witness them. No, I did not. So it is possible that someone else inflicted these injuries, another family member, a stranger. It is possible, but unlikely. Unlikely is not certainty, doctor. Thank you. No further questions. Doc stepped down. Holloway called his next witness, one of the neighbors who had signed the petition, then another, then Martha, who testified to the children's condition when they arrived at the ranch, to the fear in Emma's eyes, to the way she had hidden biscuits in her pocket. Pemberton cross-examined each witness, chipping away at their testimony, painting them as biased friends of Cole Turner. But the evidence held. Then Holloway called Eli Driscoll. The courtroom stirred. Driscoll walked to the stand, his face pale, his hands shaking slightly. He was sworn in. He sat down and looked at the judge, avoiding Vanessa's gaze. Mr. Driscoll, Holloway said, you were employed by Mrs. Brooks. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And what was your role? I did things for her, jobs. Some of them weren't legal. What kind of jobs? Delivering money, sending messages, watching people. And did you ever visit the home of Samuel Brooks? Driscoll swallowed. Yes, sir, many times. During the time Mr. Brooks was ill? Yes. What did you observe during those visits? Driscoll took a breath. He looked at his hands. I saw Mrs. Brooks put something in Mr. Brooks's soup, powder. She did it every night. I asked her what it was, and she said it was medicine. But she told me later that it was something to help him sleep. She paid me to keep quiet. And did you keep quiet? For a while, yes. Why are you testifying now? Driscoll looked up. He looked at Emma, sitting in the front row, holding Noah in her arms. Because I saw that little girl standing in the door of that ranch house. And I saw her father's eyes in her face. And I knew I couldn't live with myself if I didn't tell the truth. Pemberton rose. His voice was sharp. Mr. Driscoll, you have admitted to being a criminal. You have admitted to taking money to keep quiet. Why should this court believe anything you say? Because I got no reason to lie. I'm already going to prison. I'm not trying to save myself. You're testifying in the hope of a lighter sentence. I'm testifying because it's the right thing to do. Pemberton pressed him, but Driscoll did not break. He answered every question, his voice steady, his eyes clear. When he stepped down, the courtroom was silent. Holloway looked at the judge. The territory calls its final witness, Emma Brooks. The room went still. Emma stood up. She handed Noah to Martha, who was sitting behind her. She walked to the witness stand, her small boots clicking on the wooden floor. She climbed into the chair, her feet dangling. She looked at Judge Pike, and her voice was clear. I'm ready, Your Honor. Judge Pike leaned forward. Miss Emma, you understand that you are under oath? Yes, sir. And you understand that you must tell the truth? Yes, sir. Then proceed. Holloway approached her gently. Emma, can you tell us what happened to your father? Emma looked at the courtroom. She looked at Vanessa, who was staring at her with cold hatred. She did not flinch. She began to speak. And the truth, held back for so long, finally began to flow. The courtroom held its breath as Emma settled into the witness chair. Her feet did not reach the floor, and she swung them once, then stopped, as if remembering she was supposed to be still. She looked at Holloway with the same steady gaze she had given Cole on the day they met, and she waited. Holloway spoke gently, his voice carrying through the silent room. Emma, I'm going to ask you some questions. You just answer them as best you can. Tell us what you remember. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Let's start with your father, Samuel Brooks. Can you tell us about him? Emma's hands folded in her lap. He was tall. He had brown eyes like Noah. He used to sing to me at night, even though he wasn't very good at it. He said the songs were about cowboys who rode into long valleys and never came back. I thought they were sad, but he said they were beautiful. She paused. He was sick for a long time. Before he got sick, he used to lift me up on his shoulders and carry me around the yard. After he got sick, he couldn't lift me anymore, but he still held my hand. When did he get sick? I don't know exactly. It was after Vanessa came. She married him, and then he started getting tired all the time. He stayed in bed. He couldn't eat much. The doctor came, but he never got better. And Vanessa, that's your stepmother. Yes, sir. How did she treat you? Emma was quiet for a moment. She looked at her hands. She didn't like me. She said I was too loud and too much trouble. She said if I hadn't been born, her life would have been easier. Did she ever hurt you? Yes, sir. Can you tell us how? Emma's voice remained steady, but her hands tightened in her lap. She hit me. With her hand, with a switch, with a wooden spoon. She locked me in the closet when I did something wrong. Sometimes she forgot I was in there, and I stayed until she remembered. How often did this happen? Every day. Sometimes more than once. Did she ever hurt your brother? No, she didn't care about Noah. She said he was just a hungry mouth that didn't belong to her. She didn't hit him because he was too small, but she didn't feed him enough either. I had to sneak milk to him when she wasn't looking. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of a reporter's pen. Several women in the audience had tears on their faces. Judge Pike sat motionless, his eyes fixed on Emma. Emma, Holloway continued, Do you remember the day you and Noah were left in the desert? Yes, sir. Can you tell us what happened? Emma took a breath. She looked at Cole, sitting in the front row, his hands gripping the bench in front of him. She looked at Martha, holding Noah, the baby sleeping peacefully. Then she turned back to Holloway. Vanessa woke me up early. She said we were going on a trip. She put me and Noah in the wagon. She didn't bring any food or water. I asked her where we were going, and she said she was taking us somewhere safe. She paused. Her voice dropped. But she wasn't. She drove for a long time. Past the church, past the old mill, out into the desert. Then she stopped the wagon right in the middle of nowhere. She told me to get down. I didn't want to, but she grabbed my arm and pulled me. She dropped Noah into my arms. She said, "You're on your own now." Then she drove away. Did she say anything else? Emma's chin trembled. She said nobody would miss us. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Pike banged his gavel. Order! Order in the court! When the silence returned, Holloway asked, Emma, did you know where you were? No, sir. I just walked. I followed the wagon ruts. I didn't know where they led. I just knew I had to keep moving, because if I stopped, Noah would die. How long did you walk? All day, from morning until the afternoon. I don't know how far. I just kept walking. Did you have any water? No, sir, not after the first hour. I found a canteen in the wagon that had a little left, but it was gone by noon. Did you have any food? There was a biscuit in my pocket. It was stale. I gave it to Noah. I soaked it with the last of the water and fed it to him. Did you eat anything yourself? No, sir. Not even a bite? Emma shook her head. There wasn't enough for both of us. The courtroom was so quiet that the sound of a fly buzzing against a window pane seemed loud. Judge Pike removed his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. Holloway took a breath before continuing. Emma, do you know what happened to your father? How he died? Yes, sir. Can you tell us? Emma looked directly at Vanessa. The woman in black sat rigid, her face a mask, her eyes burning. Emma held her gaze. She killed him. A gasp went through the room. Pemberton shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is speculating. Judge Pike held up his hand. Overruled. The witness may continue. Emma did not look away from Vanessa. I saw her. I was on the stairs. She didn't know I was there. She was in the parlor with a man in a black hat. I heard her say the medicine wasn't working fast enough. She said the man owed her a favor. She said when Daddy was gone, she would split it with him 50-50. What would she split? Daddy's money. He had a lot of it. He told me once. He said the bank in Tucson was holding it for me and Noah. He said even if something happened to him, the bank would still hold it. He showed me the papers. He hid them under the floor. When did he show you this? About a week before he died. He made me promise to remember. He said if anything happened, I should tell the sheriff to look in the floor. And did you tell anyone? Emma's voice faltered for the first time. I told the doctor, the one who came to see Daddy. I told him Vanessa was putting something in the soup. He said little girls shouldn't tell stories. He said I'd get a whipping if I kept talking. Holloway let the silence stretch. Then he said, Emma, I want to show you something. He walked to the prosecution table and picked up a piece of paper. Do you recognize this? Emma looked at it, her eyes filled with tears. That's my daddy's letter. He wrote it to me. How do you know it's his handwriting? Because I watched him write it. He was too weak to sit up, but he propped himself on his elbow and wrote it. He sealed it with wax and told me not to open it until I was safe. I kept it under my pillow until the night Vanessa threw us out. Then I put it in my pocket. And where is it now? I gave it to my cowboy dad. He kept it safe for me. Holloway turned to the judge. Your Honor, I would like to enter this letter into evidence, along with the journal and the trust documents previously presented. Granted. Holloway faced Emma one last time. Emma, you've been through more than any child should ever have to endure. I want to thank you for your courage. I have no further questions. He sat down. The courtroom turned to Pemberton, who rose slowly, adjusting his jacket. He walked toward Emma with the easy confidence of a man who had broken many witnesses. Miss Brooks, he said, you've told us quite a story, but I want to ask you a few things. Yes, sir. Your father was sick for a long time, wasn't he? Yes, sir. And during that time you were very young, only 4 years old when he first became ill, is that correct? Yes. Sometimes when children are very young, they remember things that didn't happen. They imagine things. Do you know what I mean? Emma's brow furrowed. I know what you're saying, but I'm not imagining. How can you be sure? Memory is a tricky thing. You were tired. You were scared. Maybe you heard someone say something and you thought it was something else. I heard what I heard. Did anyone tell you what to say today? Mr. Turner? Mr. Holloway? Did they tell you to say certain things? Emma shook her head. No, sir. They told me to tell the truth. And you're telling the truth now? Yes, sir. Pemberton smiled. It was not a kind smile. You said you saw Mrs. Brooks put something in your father's soup, but you were on the stairs. That's a long way away. How could you see what she was doing? I could see the kitchen from the stairs. The door was open. Was it dark? There was a lamp on the table. And you were hiding on the stairs? I was sitting on the steps. I wasn't hiding. I was playing with my doll. Playing with your doll. And you just happened to see Mrs. Brooks put powder in the soup. Yes. And you didn't tell anyone? Not your father? I told him. He was too sick to do anything. You told him, but he didn't believe you. He believed me, but he couldn't stop her. He was dying. Pemberton paused. He walked back to the defense table, picked up a piece of paper and read from it. You also claim that Mrs. Brooks hit you regularly, but the doctor who examined you after the abandonment noted that some of your bruises were old. Is it possible that you got those bruises playing, falling down, running into things? Emma shook her head firmly. No, sir. I know what a hit feels like. I know the difference. How can a 5-year-old know the difference? Because I've been hit a lot. When you get hit a lot, you learn. Pemberton's face flickered. He recovered quickly. Miss Brooks, you seem like a very bright child. But you also seem like a child who has been through a terrible ordeal. Sometimes, when children go through terrible ordeals, they mix up what really happened with what they fear happened. Isn't it possible that you are confusing your fears with reality? Emma looked at him. She looked at the judge. She looked at the audience, at Cole, at Martha holding Noah. Then she looked back at Pemberton, and her voice was clear as a bell. I know what I saw. I know what happened to my daddy. I know what Vanessa did to me, and I know that you're trying to make me sound like a liar because you don't have any other way to win. But I'm not lying. I'm telling the truth. And the truth is that Vanessa Brooks is a murderer, and she left me and Noah to die in the desert. And Mr. Cole Turner saved us. And if you take us away from him, you'll be doing the same thing she did. The courtroom erupted. Judge Pike banged his gavel repeatedly. Order! Order! Pemberton stood frozen. His mouth opened, then closed. He turned and walked back to his seat without another question. Judge Pike looked at Emma. Miss Emma, you may step down. She climbed down from the witness chair. She walked across the courtroom, her steps steady. She did not look at Vanessa. She walked to Cole and sat down beside him, and he put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him. The rest of the hearing moved quickly. Holloway called a few more witnesses to corroborate the timeline. Martha testified to the condition of the children upon arrival. Doc Whitfield was recalled to confirm the bruising patterns. The journal was read aloud, portions of it, the dying man's words filling the courtroom like a ghost. Pemberton gave a closing argument that was long and legal and full of objections to the evidence. He argued that the trust documents were obtained illegally, that the journal could have been forged, that Driscoll was a criminal whose word meant nothing. But his voice lacked conviction. The jury, if there had been one, would have seen through it. But there was no jury. The decision rested with Judge Pike. Holloway's closing was short and simple. Your Honor, this case is not about legal technicalities. It is about 2 children who were abandoned, abused, and left to die. It is about a man who found them, saved them, and gave them a home. The evidence is clear. The truth is clear. We ask only that the court do what is just. Judge Pike sat silently for a long moment. The courtroom waited. He shuffled the papers in front of him, arranged them, and then looked up. I will take this matter under advisement. The court will recess for 1 hour. I will deliver my ruling at 4 o'clock. He banged his gavel. The courtroom rose. The next hour was the longest of Cole Turner's life. He sat in the hallway with Emma on his lap, Noah in Martha's arms, and a knot in his chest that would not loosen. People came by to offer encouragement. Old Joe, the Wallace brothers, Reverend Hayes. Doc Whitfield sat beside him, saying nothing, just being there. Emma did not speak. She leaned against Cole's chest, her eyes closed, her breathing even. She had fallen asleep, exhausted from the weight of her testimony. At 4 o'clock, the bailiff called them back into the courtroom. They filed in, took their seats. Judge Pike entered, his face unreadable. He sat down and looked at the room. "I have reached a decision," he said. Cole's heart stopped. Emma woke up, sensing the change in the air. She sat up straight, her hand finding Cole's. Judge Pike began to speak. Judge Pike adjusted his spectacles and looked at the papers before him. He looked at Vanessa, sitting rigid and pale at the defense table. He looked at Emma, curled against Cole's side, her small hand gripping his. He looked at Cole, whose face was a mask of forced calm, betraying nothing of the storm inside him. "This court has heard 3 days of testimony," the judge began, his voice carrying through the silent chamber. "We have heard from medical experts, from neighbors, from a man who confessed to his own complicity in a crime. We have examined documents, journals, and a letter written by a dying father to his daughter." He paused. He removed his spectacles and polished them slowly with a cloth from his pocket, then replaced them. "But the most compelling evidence in this case came from a 5-year-old girl. She sat in this courtroom, under oath, and she told us what happened to her. She did not falter. She did not embellish. She spoke with a clarity that I have rarely seen in witnesses 3 times her age." He looked directly at Vanessa. "Mrs. Brooks, you have been accused of heinous acts. The evidence against you is substantial. The court finds that the testimony of Emma Brooks is credible. The court finds that the journal of Samuel Brooks is authentic. The court finds that the trust documents are valid, and that you, Mrs. Brooks, have no legal claim to the assets of your deceased husband." Vanessa's face went white. Her lawyer, Pemberton, placed a hand on her arm, but she shook it off. "Furthermore," Judge Pike continued, "the court finds that the abandonment of Emma and Noah Brooks in the desert was not an accident. It was a deliberate act of cruelty, motivated by greed and a desire to eliminate obstacles to your inheritance. The court finds that you are unfit to be a guardian. The court finds that you have committed fraud, perjury, and conspiracy to commit murder." He paused again. The room held its breath. "Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that the petition for custody filed by Vanessa Brooks is denied. Full and permanent guardianship of Emma Brooks and Noah Brooks is hereby granted to Cole Turner. The court further orders that adoption proceedings may commence immediately upon the completion of standard paperwork. The Territorial Office of Child Welfare is instructed to expedite this process." A ripple of sound went through the courtroom. Martha let out a sob and covered her mouth. Doc Whitfield closed his eyes and breathed. Old Joe Caldwell slapped his knee, then caught himself. Cole did not move. He sat frozen, the words washing over him, not quite believing. Emma looked up at him. "Cowboy, Dad? Did we win?" He looked down at her. He opened his mouth, but no words came. He nodded. Emma's face broke into a smile. It was not a small smile. It was a full, radiant, tear-streaked smile that seemed to light up the entire room. She threw her arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder. Vanessa stood up. Her chair scraped the floor. "This is not over," she said, her voice low and shaking. "I will appeal. I will take this to the Supreme Court. You cannot do this to me." "Mrs. Brooks," Judge Pike said, "you are in no position to make threats. The court also finds probable cause to issue a warrant for your arrest on charges of attempted murder, fraud, and child endangerment. Bailiff, please take her into custody." The bailiff stepped forward. Vanessa's composure shattered. She screamed, a raw animal sound that echoed off the walls. She lunged toward the bench, but the bailiff caught her, and Pemberton grabbed her arm. "Get your hands off me! I did nothing! They have no proof!" "The journal," Judge Pike said. "The testimony of Eli Driscoll. The bruises on a 5-year-old girl. That is proof enough for this court. Vanessa fought as they dragged her toward the side door. Her eyes found Emma, and she locked onto her with a gaze of pure hatred. "You did this," she hissed. "You little viper. You will burn for this." Cole stood up, putting himself between Vanessa and Emma. He did not speak. He just stood there, a wall of silence and strength. The bailiff pulled Vanessa through the door. The sound of her screams faded, then stopped as the door slammed shut. The courtroom began to empty. People came up to Cole, shaking his hand, patting his back. Reverend Hayes prayed over them. Old Joe Caldwell hugged Emma, then backed away quickly, embarrassed by his own emotion. But Cole barely saw them. He was looking at Emma, who was still holding his hand, her face pressed against his arm. "Miss Emma," he said, his voice rough. "You did it." "You did it." "No," she said, looking up at him. "We did it." He knelt down and pulled her into his arms. She hugged him back, and for the first time since he had met her, she cried openly. Not silent tears, but real sobs that shook her small body. He held her and let her cry, and he did not try to stop her. Martha came over with Noah, who was awake and cooing. She knelt beside them and wrapped her free arm around Emma, and the three of them stayed there, a huddle of warmth in the empty courtroom. Doc Whitfield approached. "Cole, I've got a wagon outside. We can head back to the boarding house, get some rest." Cole nodded. He stood up, lifting Emma with him. She wrapped her legs around his waist and buried her face in his neck. He carried her out of the courtroom, past the empty benches, past the bailiff who held the door, into the fading afternoon light. Phoenix was golden in the sunset. The streets were busy, but the world seemed muffled, distant. Cole walked to the boarding house with Emma in his arms, Martha beside him with Noah, Doc following behind. They climbed the stairs to their rooms, and Cole laid Emma on the bed. She was already half asleep, her hand still clutching his shirt. "Stay," she murmured. "I'm not going anywhere, Miss Emma." He sat down in the chair beside the bed. Martha put Noah in the cradle they had borrowed, then sat on the edge of the bed, her hand on Emma's back. "She's going to sleep for a long time," Martha said. "She's been holding it together for weeks. It's all coming out now. She earned the rest." Martha looked at him. "You did it, Cole. We did it. Every one of us. She's going to be all right. They both are." Cole looked at Emma's face, peaceful in sleep. The bruises had faded. The shadows under her eyes were lighter. She looked like a child, finally, for the first time since he had found her. "Get some sleep yourself," Martha said. "I'll watch them." Cole nodded. He did not move. Martha smiled. She knew he would not leave that chair. She pulled a blanket from the foot of the bed and laid it over his lap, then sat back in her own chair, Noah sleeping beside her. The night settled over Phoenix. In the jail at the edge of town, Vanessa Brooks sat in a cold cell, staring at the wall. Her lawyers were already filing an appeal. She had money, connections, and a burning hatred that would not be extinguished. But for now, in a small room at a boarding house, a little girl slept in her cowboy dad's arms, and the world was safe. The next morning, Cole woke to find Emma standing by his chair, holding a biscuit. "I saved you one," she said. He took it. It was warm. She must have snuck down to the kitchen while he was sleeping. "Thank you, Miss Emma." She climbed into his lap. "What happens now?" "Now we go home. We go back to the ranch, and we live our lives. I teach you to ride better. You help Martha with the biscuits. Noah grows up and becomes a rancher, if he wants. And Vanessa? She's going to be in jail for a long time, and if she ever gets out, she won't come near you, because I'll be there." Emma nodded. She leaned her head against his chest. "I like that plan." "Me too." They sat there as the morning light grew stronger, and through the window the spires of the courthouse caught the golden sun. Justice had been served. But for Cole Turner, the real work was just beginning. The ride home was a celebration. Holloway had arranged for a proper wagon with springs, and Martha had packed enough food for a small army. The weather held, clear and warm, and the journey passed in a blur of easy conversation and shared laughter. Emma sat beside Cole on the wagon seat, Noah in her lap, her face turned up to the sky. She talked more than she ever had, pointing out birds and clouds and distant trees, asking questions about everything. Cole answered each one patiently, sometimes making up answers when he did not know the truth. They stopped at noon under a stand of cottonwoods near a stream. While the horses drank, Emma took off her shoes and waded into the shallow water, splashing and laughing. Noah watched from Martha's arms, his eyes wide, his hands reaching toward the light. Cole sat on the bank, watching them. Doc Whitfield sat beside him, chewing on a piece of grass. "She's going to be all right," Doc said. "I know. Takes time, though. Healing. It don't happen overnight." "I got time." Doc nodded. "You're a good man, Cole Turner. You did a good thing." "I just did what anyone would have done." "No, that's not true. Most folks would have ridden past. Would have figured it wasn't their problem. But you stopped. You got down off your horse and you picked them up. That's the difference." Cole did not answer. He watched Emma chase a butterfly along the stream, her laughter ringing through the air. "I didn't have a choice," he said finally. "Horse stopped." Doc laughed. "That horse is smarter than most people I know." They reached the ranch at sundown of the second day. The house was waiting, dark and quiet. Cole lifted Emma down from the wagon, and she ran to the porch, then stopped and turned. "Home," she said. "Yeah, Miss Emma, home." She walked inside. The lamp was lit. The fire was laid. Martha had sent word ahead, and the neighbors had stocked the pantry and filled the woodbox. The house was warm and welcoming. Emma walked to the bedroom, stood at the threshold. Her bed was made, the rag doll propped on the pillow. The cradle was beside it, empty now because Martha was bringing Noah in. She climbed onto the bed and lay down, spreading her arms. "It's soft," she said, "the softest bed in 3 counties. Vanessa's beds were hard. She said soft beds made children weak." Cole sat down on the edge of the bed. Vanessa was wrong about a lot of things. Emma was quiet. Then she said, "Cowboy Dad?" "Yeah." "Can I call you just Dad?" Cole's throat closed. He could not speak. He nodded. She smiled. "Good. Because that's what you are now." She rolled over and closed her eyes. Cole sat there, his hand on her back, feeling the rise and fall of her breathing. He stayed until she was asleep, and then he stayed longer, because he could not bring himself to leave. In the kitchen, Martha was humming her old hymn. Noah was sleeping in the cradle. Doc Whitfield had gone to his own house down the road. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, full. Cole finally stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the dark prairie, the stars scattered across the sky like promises. Somewhere out there, Vanessa Brooks was in a cell, her empire crumbling. And here, in a small house on a hard land, a new family was growing. He thought about the trail that had led him here, the horse that had stopped, the child who had looked up at him with eyes that held no hope, the long ride to Blackwell's, the shootout in the rocks, the courtroom full of strangers. And he thought about the word Emma had just given him, Dad. A word he had never expected to hear again after Mary died. A word that had found him in the dust of the desert and taken root in his heart. He pressed his hand against the window and whispered to the night, "Thank you, Buck." The horse, somewhere in the barn, stamped once in answer. The next morning dawned clear and golden. Cole was up before sunrise, as always. He was in the barn, forking hay into the stalls, when he heard a small voice behind him. "Dad?" He turned. Emma stood in the doorway of the barn, still in her nightgown, her hair a mess, her feet bare. "What are you doing up so early, Miss Emma?" "Couldn't sleep. Had a dream." "About what?" She walked toward him, her steps careful on the dusty floor. "About Mama. My real Mama. She was standing in a field of flowers. She said she was proud of me." Cole set down the pitchfork. "That sounds like a good dream." "It was. She said to tell you thank you." Cole's heart clenched. He did not know what to say. Emma reached him and leaned against his leg. "I'm hungry. I'll make you breakfast." "You make biscuits?" "I make terrible biscuits. But I can make eggs." She laughed. "Martha says your eggs are just as bad." "Then we'll both suffer together." She took his hand, and they walked to the house. The sun was rising over the prairie, painting the world in shades of gold and pink. A new day was beginning. And somewhere in a jail cell far away, Vanessa Brooks awoke to the cold reality of iron bars and a future that had crumbled to dust. She had lost. She knew it now, deep in her bones. The appeal would fail. The money was gone. The children were gone. Everything she had schemed and stolen and killed for was gone. She pressed her face against the bars and stared at the gray light filtering through the high window. She thought of Emma, of the look in the girl's eyes as she testified. She thought of Cole Turner, the man who had ruined everything. But even in her hatred, there was a flicker of something else, a recognition. She had been beaten, not by the law, not by a lawyer, but by a 5-year-old child who had refused to break. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she was silent. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet joys. Cole taught Emma how to ride properly, not just sitting on a horse, but guiding it, working with it. She took to it naturally, her small hands gentle on the reins. She learned to help Martha in the garden, planting beans and tomatoes, watering them each evening. She learned to read better, sitting with Cole by the fire, sounding out words from the dog-eared books on the shelf. Noah grew. He rolled over, then sat up, then began to crawl. Emma was his constant companion, playing with him, talking to him, teaching him the names of things. He called her Em before he could say anything else. The adoption was finalized on a cool October morning. Cole signed the papers in front of a judge, and Emma and Noah Brooks became Emma and Noah Turner. There was no ceremony, just a handshake and a stamp and a new birth certificate that listed Cole Turner as father. Emma held her new paper in her hands, reading it carefully. "It says I'm yours now. It says you always were. This just makes it official." She looked up at him. "Good." She tucked the paper into the pocket where she used to keep biscuits. It was still there, years later, worn and faded, but never lost. Life on the ranch continued. The seasons turned. Summers brought heat and dust and the endless work of cattle. Winters brought cold and the quiet of snow on the prairie. Emma grew taller, stronger, her laughter more frequent. Noah became a boy with his father's eyes and his sister's stubbornness. Cole never remarried. He did not need to. He had Martha, who stayed on as housekeeper and grandmother to the children. He had Doc Whitfield, who came for Sunday dinners. He had neighbors who became family. And he had Emma. She called him Dad every day. Sometimes she called him Cowboy Dad when she was feeling playful. He answered to both. One evening, years later, when Emma was 12 and Noah was 7, they sat on the porch after supper. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Emma was reading a book. Noah was playing with a carved horse Cole had made for him. "Dad?" Emma said. "Yeah, I want to tell you something." He looked at her. She had grown into a tall girl, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's gentle smile. She was not the scared child he had found anymore. She was strong, confident, full of life. "I'm glad you stopped," she said, "that day. I'm glad Buck stopped in the trail." Cole smiled. "Me too, Miss Emma." "Me too." She leaned over and kissed his cheek. It was the first time she had done that without being prompted. Then she went back to her book, as if nothing had happened. Cole sat on the porch, Noah playing at his feet, Emma reading beside him, and he watched the sun go down over his land. The wind carried the smell of hay and horses and home. He thought about the long road that had brought them here, the desert, the courtroom, the battles fought and won, and he thought about the horse that had stopped, the horse that had changed everything. He looked up at the stars beginning to appear, and he whispered to the night, "Thank you, Buck." From the barn, a horse stamped once, in answer. The years rolled on, quiet and full. Emma became a young woman, then married a rancher from the next county. Noah took over the Triple T, running it with the same steady hand his father had taught him. And Cole grew old, his hair turning gray, his step slowing, but his heart still full. He died on a spring morning, sitting in his chair on the porch, looking out at the land he had loved. Emma was there, holding his hand. Noah stood behind her, his hat in his hands. Cole looked at them, his children, his legacy. He smiled. "You too," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." Emma squeezed his hand. "You saved us, Dad." "No," he said, "you saved me." He closed his eyes. The wind blew across the prairie, carrying the sound of a horse stamping in the barn, the distant lowing of cattle, the laughter of a child that had long since grown. And Cole Turner went home, to a long valley where the cowboys rode, and where a little girl with dark eyes was waiting to welcome him. The morning after Cole Turner died, the sun rose over the Triple T Ranch the same way it had for 40 years. It came up slow and gold, burning off the thin layer of frost that had settled on the grass overnight, casting long shadows from the barn and the corral and the house where a family was learning to live without its center. The wind was quiet, holding its breath. The cattle stood motionless in the near pasture, as if they too understood that something had shifted in the order of things. Emma sat on the porch steps, wrapped in a wool blanket that still smelled of Cole's tobacco and saddle leather. She was 34 years old now, a woman with a husband and 2 children of her own. But in that moment she felt like the 5-year-old who had stood barefoot in the dust, holding a baby and watching her only hope disappear into the heat. The same hollow ache pressed against her ribs, the same fear that the world was about to swallow her whole. But she was not that child anymore. She had learned, in the long years between, that grief was not the end. It was a passage, and she had been taught how to walk through it by the man who had taught her everything else. Noah came out of the house and sat down beside her. He was 29 years old now, broad-shouldered and steady, his face a younger mirror of the man who had raised them. He held a coffee cup in each hand and offered one to Emma. She took it, her fingers brushing his. "Folks are starting to arrive," Noah said. "Martha's in the kitchen, making enough food to feed the whole territory. Reverend Hayes is on his way from Blackwell's." Emma nodded. She did not speak. "He lived a good life," Noah said. "A long one. He saw us grow up. He saw his grandchildren. He had that." "He did," Emma said. Her voice was quiet, rough from a night of silent tears. "But it don't make it easier." "No, it don't." They sat together, brother and sister, the way they had sat together 1,000 times before. The coffee steamed in the cool morning air. A hawk circled high above the barn, riding a thermal. "I found something," Noah said after a long silence. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed and creased. It was on his desk, in an envelope with your name on it. Emma took the paper. Her hands trembled. She unfolded it and saw Cole's handwriting, shaky with age but still firm, still familiar. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, I've gone on ahead. Don't be sad too long. I've had a full life, and the best part of it was the day Buck stopped in the trail. You gave me more than I ever gave you, Miss Emma. You gave me a reason to get up in the morning. You gave me a family. You gave me the name Dad, and that was the finest gift any man could ever receive. I want you to know something. I was a hard man before I found you. I had shut myself off from the world. I thought that was strength, but you showed me that strength was not about standing alone. It was about letting someone in. It was about carrying each other when the trail got rough. You were the bravest person I ever knew, and you taught me to be brave too. Tell Noah I'm proud of him. Tell Martha she was the best friend a man could ask for. Tell my grandchildren that their granddad loved them, even if he didn't say it enough. And Emma, when you feel lost, when the world feels too big and too hard, remember the desert. Remember that you walked through it once and came out the other side. You can walk through anything. I'll be waiting for you in that long valley. Save me a spot by the fire. Your cowboy dad." Emma read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully, the way she had folded her father's letter all those years ago, and pressed it against her heart. The tears came then. Not violent, but steady, a river that had been waiting for this moment. She did not try to stop them. She let them fall. Noah put his arm around her shoulders. He did not speak. He just held her, the way Cole had held her on 100 nights when the nightmares came. The way he had held her in the courtroom when she was too small to reach the floor. The way he had held her when she learned to ride, when she fell in love, when she gave birth to her first child and was afraid she would not know how to be a mother. He had been there for all of it, and now he was gone. But the love he had planted had grown deep roots, and those roots would hold. The funeral was held at noon, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The whole county came. Old friends, neighbors, ranch hands who had worked the Triple T for decades. Reverend Hayes spoke words that carried on the wind, about a man who had found his purpose late in life and had lived it fully. About a man who had taken 2 broken children and built a family out of nothing but stubbornness and love. Doc Whitfield, now 83 and leaning on a cane, stood at the graveside and did not speak. He had said his goodbyes the night before, sitting by Cole's bed, holding his hand, remembering all the years they had shared. He did not need words. The silence said enough. Martha stood with Noah and Emma, her arm linked through Emma's. She was 75, her hair white as snow, but her eyes were still sharp and her hands still steady. She had outlived her own children, outlived her husband, and now she had outlived the man who had given her a home when she had nowhere else to go. But she did not grieve alone. She had Emma and Noah. She had the grandchildren who called her Grandma Martha. She had a family. Emma's husband, a quiet rancher named Samuel, stood behind her with their 2 children, a boy of 8 named Cole and a girl of 6 named Mary. The children did not fully understand why their mother was crying, but they stood still and solemn, because they had been told that Grandpa Cole was going to heaven, and that was a serious thing. After the burial, the house filled with people. They brought food and stories and laughter, because that was what you did on the frontier when a good man died. You celebrated his life. You remembered the time he broke his leg chasing a steer and still finished the roundup. The time he rode 40 miles in a blizzard to get medicine for a sick neighbor. The time he took in 2 orphan children and raised them as his own. Emma moved through the crowd, accepting hugs and condolences, her smile steady. She was the woman of the house now, the matriarch of the Triple T. But in her pocket she carried the letter, and her fingers touched it often, drawing strength from the words. As the afternoon wore on, she slipped out the back door and walked to the barn. The familiar smell of hay and horses wrapped around her like an old blanket. She walked to Buck's stall, long empty, but she still felt the big bay's presence. He had died 3 years ago, old and content, buried on the hill overlooking the ranch. A simple marker bore his name and the words, "He stopped," and everything changed. Emma leaned against the stall door and closed her eyes. She remembered the first time she had seen Buck, standing on the ridge with Cole beside him. She remembered the way the horse had lowered his head and snuffled at her hair, as if he knew, as if he had been waiting for her. "You knew, didn't you?" she whispered. "You knew what was coming. You stopped for a reason." The barn was silent, but in her heart she heard an answer. Yes, and it was the best reason in the world. She walked out of the barn and stood in the yard, looking at the house where she had grown up. The porch where Cole had taught her to read. The corral where he had taught her to ride. The kitchen where Martha had made biscuits, and the table where they had shared 1,000 meals. Every corner of this place held a memory, and every memory held his face. Noah came out of the house and walked toward her. He had grown into a man that Cole would have been proud of. Strong, kind, steady. He ran the ranch now, but he still came to Emma for advice, still called her every Sunday, still brought his children over for Sunday dinners. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm fine," Emma said, just remembering. He was something, wasn't he? He was everything. Noah looked at the horizon, where the sun was beginning its slow descent. "I used to think about what would have happened if he hadn't found us. If Buck hadn't stopped, I'd be dead. You'd be dead. We'd be bones in the desert. But he did find us." "Yeah, he did." Noah paused. "I used to be angry about it, about Daddy dying, about Vanessa, about everything. But I'm not angry anymore. I figure, if all that hadn't happened, we wouldn't have had him. And he was worth every bit of it." Emma took his hand. "He would be proud of you, Noah." "I hope so. I know so." They stood together as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The cattle began to move toward the barn, lowing softly. A cool breeze came up, carrying the smell of dust and sage, the eternal scent of the west. Emma thought about the letter in her pocket. When you feel lost, remember the desert. She had walked through the desert once, barefoot and alone, carrying a baby and a promise. She had walked out of it into the arms of a man who had no reason to love her, but had loved her anyway, and she had never stopped walking. She looked at Noah. She looked at the house where her children were playing. She looked at the land that had been her home for nearly 30 years. "I'm going to keep the ranch," she said, "for as long as I can." "I figured you would." "Samuel can help. The boys can help. We'll keep it going." Noah smiled. "That's what he would have wanted." "I know." She turned and walked back toward the house, where the laughter of her children spilled out through the open door. Noah followed. The sun set behind them, casting their shadows long across the yard. That night, after the last guests had gone and the house was quiet, Emma sat on the porch in Cole's chair. She had moved it out of his room and placed it where he had always sat, facing the prairie, watching the stars come out. She wrapped herself in his blanket and looked up at the sky. The stars were bright, scattered across the darkness like dust on a black velvet cloth. She picked out the constellations he had taught her, the Big Dipper, Orion, the North Star. She remembered lying on the grass with him on summer nights, listening to his stories about the cowboys who rode into long valleys. Now she understood those stories. They were not sad. They were about men who had found what they were looking for, even if it cost them everything. Men who had loved deeply and lost and loved again. Men who had ridden into the sunset not because they were defeated, but because they had finished their journey. Cole had finished his. He had ridden into that long valley, and he was waiting for her. But not yet. There was still work to do, children to raise, a ranch to run, a legacy to carry forward. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the letter. She read it one more time, by the light of the lamp that glowed through the window. When she finished, she folded it and put it back. "Thank you, Cowboy Dad," she whispered, "for everything." A wind came up, rustling the leaves of the cottonwood by the barn. It carried no voice, no sign, but Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest, as if someone had wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She smiled. She sat in the chair until the moon rose high and the stars wheeled overhead. And then she went inside, to the family that was waiting, to the life that he had given her. The next morning she woke early. She made biscuits for the first time without Martha's help, and they came out golden and light. Her children ate them with honey, laughing at the crumbs on their chins. Samuel kissed her goodbye and rode out to check the fences. Noah came by with his own family, and the cousins played in the yard while the adults drank coffee on the porch. "These are good biscuits," Martha said, taking a bite. "Learned from the best," Emma said. Martha smiled. "Cole would be proud. He always said your biscuits were better than mine. He was a terrible liar. Best kind of man. Knew when to lie and when to tell the truth." Emma looked at Martha. "What am I going to do without him, Martha?" Martha set down her coffee and took Emma's hand. Her fingers were gnarled with age, but her grip was still strong. "You're going to do what he taught you to do. You're going to keep going. You're going to love your children. You're going to love this land. And when you get lonely, you're going to talk to him. He'll hear. He always did." Emma squeezed her hand. "I love you, Martha." "I love you too, child. Now eat your biscuit before it gets cold." The years that followed were full. Emma and Samuel had 2 more children, a daughter named Rose and a son named Turner. The Triple T grew and thrived, passing from Noah to his son in turn. Emma lived to be 87, surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the matriarch of a sprawling family that spread across the territory. She never stopped talking to Cole. She talked to him when she planted the garden. She talked to him when the first calf of spring was born. She talked to him when her children married and when her grandchildren were born. She told him everything, and she always felt that he was listening. On her 87th birthday, she gathered the whole family on the porch of the old house. The same porch where Cole had sat and watched the stars. The same porch where she had learned to read. The same porch where she had said goodbye to him. Her great-grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter ringing through the air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A cool breeze carried the smell of hay and horses. Emma sat in Cole's chair, wrapped in his blanket, surrounded by the people she loved. She looked out at the land he had given her, the land that had become her home, and she thought about the desert, about the dust and the heat and the baby in her arms, about the man who had stopped. She smiled. "Happy birthday, Grandma." her youngest granddaughter said, climbing into her lap. "Thank you, sweetheart. What are you looking at?" Emma pointed at the horizon. "See that long valley out there?" "Yes. That's where my daddy is. He's waiting for me." "Are you going to go see him?" "Someday. Not yet. I've got too many biscuits to bake." The girl laughed. She did not understand, but she would, in time. Emma leaned back in the chair, closed her eyes, and let the warmth of the sun and the laughter of her family wash over her. She was tired, but it was a good tired. The tired of a life well lived, the tired of a journey complete. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in colors too beautiful to name, she heard a sound on the wind, the stamp of a hoof, a soft whicker, and a voice, rough and warm, calling her name. She did not open her eyes, she just smiled. "I'm coming, Cowboy Dad, but you're going to have to wait a little longer. I'm not done yet." She heard his laugh carried on the breeze, and she felt his presence settle around her like a blessing. And she knew, with a certainty that reached all the way back to the desert, that she had found what she had been looking for. A home, a family, a love that would never fade. She opened her eyes and looked at the stars beginning to appear. She thought about all the souls who had traveled this land before her, the pioneers and the dreamers, the broken and the brave. She thought about the children who would come after, who would inherit this legacy of dust and hope. And she thought about the horse that had stopped in the trail, and the man who had gotten down to see why. This is Clint Dawson, and you've been listening to Frontier Heart Audio. Until next time, keep your heart open and your trails safe.